Welcome to The Real Review, sponsored by PickTalk and Parametric Studios, where you get some of the latest happenings, real thoughts, and real perspectives in the world of film and television. Today, we're going to be talking about Ghostbusters Afterlife. Is it life after death, or death to the life of the fan-favorite franchise? That and more on today's episode of The Real Review, so stay tuned.
Welcome to The Real Review.
Supposed to keep talking.
No, you're fine. So
I was gonna do a joke, but I decided not to.
Oh, very, very fine. You're fine. I don't actually know oftentimes what to expect when I see a Rotten Tomato review as far as like, generally if it's like extreme opposites, like this one's pretty opposite, 63, 95, 63 critics, 95 audience, I'll probably fall somewhere in the middle. Like I do know that, but I do feel like I tend to more often understand the rationale behind why reviewers give it the score they do, but agree with the audience score, if that makes sense. There's a lot of times I'll look at the reviewer score and be like, okay, that's all based upon the way you're seeing it and the way you're feeling. I totally get that. But I tend to like it a little bit more. Like Last Jedi, right? Had a really good, I think, overall score. I could look it up real quick. Not to get into the controversial films here all of a sudden. Last Jedi.
I can't take credit for it, but somebody came up with how to actually and accurately read the Rotten Tomatoes score. Do you want to hear their theory?
Oh, yeah, sure.
While you're looking that up?
Well, I looked it up, but go ahead. Yeah, what's your theory?
The way they say to read it is you take the audience score and subtract the critic score from it.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah. That would be a fair way of doing it. So maybe I'll apply that moving forward. Yeah, for Last Jedi, it was 91 critics and 42% audience score. So the real score is like a negative 50. Yeah, like my personal enjoyment of the film as like an audience member was very low. Like I really didn't like the film. But as a reviewer, when we reviewed that one, I put it at like a B level, like a B plus level, because as far as like special effects, yeah, as far as like special effects, as far as like acting, music, the cinematography, everything like that was rocking on Last Jedi. There were so many aspects of it that were well made, well produced, well put together. The only thing that I really didn't get into very heavily, which heavily weighed my personal feelings on it, was the story. Like the story was really badly put together in my opinion, but all the other elements were so good. So like as a reviewer, I gave it a B, but as a fan, as like an audience member, I was like, this is F- because of like the way that I felt like the movie, messed up the franchise and all those types of things. So I don't know. I guess that's kind of the way that I tend to look at things. But I like that idea of putting the two reviews together.
Yeah, so it puts the Ghostbusters from 2016 at about a negative 23, if my math is right, and it puts this one at a positive 32.
Okay.
So,
pretty good.
I mean, if you think about those two movies, the critic score is higher on the 2016 Ghostbusters, but that doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
This is a better film than the 2016.
I'm very bad at math, but let's say both critic and audience was 100. A 0 score is still sorry. Sucks.
Well, I mean, I don't know how many are 100s out there, and it might be flawed. That's why I didn't take any credit for this one.
Like any average, yeah.
Because if it's 100 audience and 0 critic, it's still, I guess it's 100 then.
We're doing math here that's
it's between negative 100 and positive 100. So
our limited
zeros.
Faculties are not allowing us to do this math. Is complex. I'm just kidding. I'm not.
I mean, a negative 20 is that like a really, really, really bad movie? Is what you're saying?
Yeah,
I could agree with that.
I mean, basically, anytime the audience score is higher than the tomato meter, right?
Yeah,
then it's a decent film.
It's a decent film. Yeah,
right.
Like I said, I tend to feel more about films close to the audience, but when I review them, I try to put that aside because there's so much like as somebody that does films, like it's just there's so much that goes into making a film, editing, music, scripting.
Most people don't even give a crap about or care less about.
Yeah.
It's like Joel said with Last Jedi, though. You have to take out your emotional attachment to it.
Right, yeah. So, like, when somebody comes to me and they're like, oh, I really like Last Jedi, I'm usually like, first of all, no. But no. No, I usually go like, well, what did you like so much about it? And if they go, the story, then I'm like, okay, well, we're not going to agree. But if they go, well, it just had a really cool, like, special effects. I really liked the fights. I really liked, the music and the universe and stuff. Then I'm like, okay.
They had these cool weapons, like light swords or something.
They like never seen a Star Wars movie.
Right.
I'm still blocking.
I just found out the other day, I guess Disney's doing it's like a Star Wars experience. Did you hear about that? It's like a 2-day experience where you can check in literally to like be in a Star Wars universe like ship that's like supposed to be, flying through the galaxy and stuff like that. And you get like working missions and you have like, you're supposed to be like a member of, I think, probably one of the factions or something like that. I thought that was a pretty cool idea, but it's like $4,000.
I think it would. I think it would be cool.
And for priced out, it's pricing out your average fan.
Oh, yeah.
For sure.
It's like I don't even think I could stomach, even though I want to go see that I don't even care about the rides. I just want to go see a life-size version of the Millennium Falcon. I don't even think I can make it.
I think this is more immersive
and stuff. Oh, yeah. But no, this is like a complete, like a cruise on a starship, basically.
It looks really cool. But
I feel like for the first hour, I'd say this is awesome, and then for the next 2 days, I'd go, "Oh, we're still in character."
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, you wake up in character and go to sleep in character.
I see it descending into Lord of the Flies within the first 3 days, so it'd be an interesting
Lord of the Flies in Star Wars. They're like, "Give me the real lightsabers, I'll start killing."
Please, can we do laundry?
Well, they created like a lightsaber that actually like extends, and they have a video of that.
I saw that.
Yeah, they showed it on stage, which is part.
But it was
of that.
dark, so I couldn't tell.
Yeah,
if it already was like a glass tube.
Yeah, it might be different up close. I couldn't tell either. It looked like it was nothing there, but
it looked. Yeah, it grew out of the handle,
right?
The hilt or whatever.
Somebody said it was like a giant measuring tape sort of thing. It's like a tape that sort of unfurls or unwinds. So I don't know. I thought it looked pretty cool, but anyway, the Star Wars Disney area is pretty fun.
I just want a mini one to cut my Thanksgiving turkey with.
Oh,
you know what I mean? Just like a little 4-inch lightsaber.
Just film it with
that'd be great, Ross. You just like
a knife
bone,
and then
because you just cut right through it. It's a good piece right here.
Yeah, rotoscope in later on your Thanksgiving video. I think that'd be awesome. I'm sure that's already been done.
Why don't we do intros here? Because I always think I've been trying to get into doing that. Yeah. So I don't know, Ross, you want to go first?
Yep, I still am Ross Caliguri.
Yep.
And David Deloso.
Awesome. And I'm Joel Cunningham. Today we're going to be talking about Ghostbusters Afterlife, in case the title of the episode... Hey, we don't want to get copyrighted. Call Huey. So let me give a...
Who are you going to call? Lawsuits.
Lawsuits. The brief synopsis for this is: when a single mom and her 2 kids arrive in a small town, they begin to discover their connection to the original Ghostbusters and the secret legacy their grandfather left behind. Ooh, very spooky. Its director is Jason Reitman. Stars Carrie Coon as Callie, Paul Rudd as Gruberson, teacher, and then Finn Wolfhard as Trevor, McKenna Grace as Phoebe, Logan Kim as Podcast, and Celeste O'Connor as Lucky. That's all I'm going to talk about before we get into sort of the more spoilery type areas. So I think the one thing that could be said about this film, almost more than anything immediately, is that it is, in my opinion, a much stronger film for fans. Right. So if you are a fan of the first 2 films and you go and see this one, then you're going to get a better sense of like, okay, well, there's that element that ties into the original one, and there's this element that feels more like the original one. Whereas this one feels more like a reboot of the franchise, going in, because it's much more closely, not only because it's more closely tied to the story of the other one, but even the characters,
right,
that were a part of that one are in this one.
Definitely not a remake.
Right. Whereas the last one, it was the remake version. And that was like, we're going to start our own generations Ghostbusters with brand new characters and brand new actors and stuff.
Did you see that one?
I did. Yes.
I did not.
You did not.
No interest in it.
Honestly, yeah. Honestly, it wasn't, I disliked it for reasons that go much further beyond, because obviously it was a very politically charged thing with the whole like
that doesn't
recasting
bother me, but it just like it just didn't like interest me at all.
I tried to go into it very much with like an open. I try to do that with every film, right? Like let the hype or whatever around the film be its own thing and just be impartial. And then honestly, there was just so many elements that it didn't land well. It felt very half-baked. It felt very silly at times. And not even comparing it to the original Ghostbusters, just saying that in of itself, that film felt very tonally weird. Like there would be these moments where they were trying to go very like slapstick, stupid, dumb, but then you'd have these other moments where it was like awful, kind of like horrific type stuff that kind of went beyond a kid would want to see probably in a movie. And then there was other times it's just kind of boring. It was like,
I guess we should give
waiting
it
for
at
things to
least
happen.
one prop, and that would be maybe it kicked open a door that allowed somebody to go, hey, we should make a good Ghostbusters movie.
Yeah, absolutely. I think because there was a lot of talk, and you're probably, I don't know, both aware of this, but there's been talk for so long about doing a Ghostbusters 3.
And they did the video game at one point.
And that was kind of the story that they were going to make, I think, in Ghostbusters 3. There's a lot of reasons I believe that Ghostbusters 3 specifically never materialized. Ghostbusters 2 was a little bit of a letdown, I think, in the box office for what they were hoping it would be. There was a lot of people, especially with critics, that felt like it was kind of just a retread of what had happened in Ghostbusters 1. And then a lot of the other people that were in Ghostbusters, the series, launched into other projects and became super pop. Not that Bill Murray or anybody's like wasn't doing other stuff, but even more so, they launched into other types of things. And I think just the story with the world feeling like Ghostbusters 2 didn't perform as well, mixed with availability and everything like that, just kind of kept putting it on the back burner, then until finally we had it set. Unfortunately, it's like, well, how do you make a Ghostbusters 3 without one of the leading characters? And
Harold Ramis.
Yeah, Harold Ramis. So
I will say Ghostbusters still has a strong footing in our culture in the way that every convention I go to, they're like little factions.
Cosplay. Yeah, it's like
but they raise money or something.
Stormtrooper stuff. Yeah, no, it's awesome. Yeah.
And that's been going on as long as I could remember. So it's surprising to me that it took this long for just to keep the Ghostbusters going. I'm sad that Harold Ramis wasn't alive to see this.
Yeah.
I feel like he would have really enjoyed it and honestly added more to it. Not that it's a bad film, but he probably would have added some to it.
Yeah.
At least he didn't have to see the 2016 one.
Yeah, that's true.
It's a dark joke, but it's true.
It was probably a dark day for the Ghostbusters franchise. I think it's got to feel completely different now to be that Ghostbusters is like they're making a statement now by being this Ghostbusters.
That's why I always warn people not to get a tattoo of a band they really like, because eventually they're going to put something out that's just like horrific.
You almost have to put the year,
covered up.
The year that you get the tattoo. So you're like, no, that was the year that I liked them. So I don't know. But I personally saw the first two Ghostbusters films and I really enjoyed them.
Same.
I don't know if you.
Oh yeah, in the theater, bro.
In the theater, yeah.
And it's just that crew, that Meatballs Stripes crew.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
it's a level of comedy that just cannot exist today. Because if you go back and watch it, it's an adult comedy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
On every level. All the sexual overtones jokes.
Right. From Bill Murray.
Went right over my head as a kid.
Right.
But I remember, so my neighbor, Frank, would take us to movies because we couldn't get in because I don't even, what was it rated?
PG-13, I guess. Right?
I thought it was PG. I can look up the
13
original.
wasn't in 84.
Oh,
yeah,
sure.
that was after Temple of
So the second one's
came out.
It had a bunch of, adult jokes in it. Again, this went way over my head. I still laughed at everything. I loved it. I watch it now and I'm like, it's such a brilliant comedy.
Mm-hmm.
Like no other. But
agreed.
It's Bill Murray. Like
that's something I like.
Simplest of deliveries.
Oh, and it's quick and it's like it's over sexualized, but it's quick and it's funny and yeah.
Yeah, it's PG, the original one.
PG,
I figured, yeah.
I am thankful for this one, and I feel like it might lead to more success from other movies doing the same thing, which is making, I'm going to call it a family movie where it's that PG-13, there's plenty of entertainment for kids in there, but there's still adult jokes, and they still say the S word.
Yeah.
Right? Or
the new one is 13 now?
I think it must have been.
I can double check here, but I'm pretty sure that one was PG-13. My computer, yeah, PG-13.
But I think about growing up, and I loved the Gremlins, and I watch it as an adult now, like you're saying with Ghostbusters, and you're thinking, how was I ever allowed to even watch this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, my computer's freaking out right now. It's not a big deal. Yeah, like I saw the originals. I was born in 85, so it was a little hard for me to go see it in 84. But like I saw the originals, I think when I was in my teens.
Yeah, I was 10.
Okay. Yeah.
That dates me.
Oh, that's all right. I saw them when I was like 12 or 13, and then immediately I think there was just something about the original cast of kind of these ragtag. Yeah, I mean, you love to see the underdog story, right? You love to see the story of like people that you don't think could succeed, could accomplish things that are, looked down upon, not just by like a specific group. It's not like this group looks down on that group, but it's like everybody looked down the Ghostbusters. Like,
Right. Even though they
man,
were
woman,
doctorates
children,
and PhDs.
you know, whoever you are, academic, non-academic, you all look down the Ghostbusters. And so it's this uniting idea that like these guys could step up and become successful and do a good job. And so I think that was what.
And they're rock stars by the end.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and it was a dynamic, you know, the timing of the jokes and the way that they did the lines and the dialogue and the way that the whole team sort of cohesively worked together was just, I keep saying dynamite, but it's dynamite, you know? And so I really enjoyed it.
And then, by 84, they had been working together for a decade. When did Caddyshack come out? I don't know.
Probably earlier than that, yeah.
Yeah, probably earlier.
But maybe
than
like
that.
a decade. They had already been solidifying that chemistry,
That
right?
old school SNL crew, back when it was actually funny.
Yeah.
Um,
that dates us. It definitely feels like it's dating us a little bit.
I saw it in the theater. I was blown away. But yeah, there's so many great jokes in there. Like you know, when Peter Venkman's like doing that you know, telepathy thing, and the guy's like, I don't know, just a bunch of wavy lines. He's like,
even though he's right.
It's actually
And he just
That's
keeps
the best
looking
part,
over
is
at
like-
the cute girl and giving her
Yeah,
the
giving her the wink and
He's like,
the
what the hell, man?
Yeah.
He's like, we're paying you, aren't we? He's like, you can keep the $5.
yeah.
and the cute girl's getting him wrong, and he's like, "Did you mark these cards?"
Oh,
You know,
my.
he's like-
Yeah, that's such a cute line scene because of the way. Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry about that later, but and then the second one came out, and I had loved the first one so much. I went to see the second one, and I remember thinking it was good, not great.
Yeah, it's one of those movies, like you said, good, not great. And then when somebody says, "Well, what's different about it?" They spent more money.
Yeah.
That's kind of what it feels like.
It felt like a
Right.
much bigger budget thing,
Right.
which is kind of like part of the whole style and tone of the original one is like underdog, right?
Yeah.
So if you make everything look nice and well polished, everything feels good, it starts to feel like a blockbuster.
Right.
And that's kind of what the second one felt. It felt like an attempt at making like a blockbuster version of Ghostbusters, which it goes directly against the themes
Trying
of
to-
the first one. So,
It's like the Rocky
Yeah.
one.
twice.
Yeah.
It's just
Right.
but I would also say it's a good film. You know what I mean? Like if somebody had never seen the first one, it might be a little weird to go straight to the second one. But if you watch it, you're still going to enjoy it. I think there's still a lot of fun elements. I think it gets a bad rap for some of the elements that were kind of in it. But I enjoyed it. And then it was like, yeah, I guess we're done. Ghostbusters is done for life. And then every once in a while, as I'm getting more involved in watching films and stuff, you're like, oh, maybe there's a Ghostbusters 3, and nothing ever took shape.
They must have been, I feel like they were very protective of the franchise.
Oh, for sure.
So again, it kind of surprises me that the 2016 one got made, but I don't think that the original guys had anything to do with it, right? They didn't even make cameos, did they?
The 2016 one?
Yeah.
Yeah. They had a very loose connection to it.
So like this one, they were all on board with.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that because I saw
Bill
them on
Murray
like
is
Conan
at
O'Brien
a
and
stage
stuff.
in his career where he, you know,
Mhm.
he just does whatever he wants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
And I think he's on in interviews like Wes Anderson always gets a yes, but
Mhm.
everything else,
But before
Yeah,
I
I
saw
could
this
care
movie,
less
I
about.
saw Ernie Hudson, Bill Murray, and Dan Aykroyd on Jimmy Fallon or one of those type late night shows, and they were all just like, "This is the one." You know, we saw this script and we wanted to get behind this. So
Yeah. I think there was a mixed message that
Yeah,
I don't
he
remember
seemed
everything
like
because
he
it was a
could
while
care.
back, but there was definitely a mixed message that was going on with the original team on Ghostbusters 2016. And I think a lot of them sensed there was some like butting of heads there, intention to just make something come out, that they wanted to just get a project out, but then kind of put a new spin on it. And I think a lot of the original cast felt, I don't know, I can't speak for them, but I never got the sense that they were all like, yes, this is definitively the thing that we want to see with the continuations of the Ghostbusters model. And I don't know, maybe that was just based upon the film itself, like
Right.
looking at the script and knowledge of that. I know that a lot of the reason why Ghostbusters 3 never materialized beyond just what happened with the theatrical release of Ghostbusters 2 was the original team just never had an agreed upon story and everything for Ghostbusters 3. Like they never put all the pieces together with all the actors hopping on board and being okay with it. And I think it's just one of those things where they were working with so many different people. You know,
Mhm.
you've got at least the 4 people that are the main cast, and then you've got, you know, Rick Moranis, who's like not even acting anymore, and
for good reason, though.
for good
I
reason,
don't know,
yeah.
his story. But
Yeah, so like, you know, they've got all these people that are probably trying to coordinate getting them all on board for it, and it just never materialized. I think a lot of people were quick for Ghostbusters 2, and so anyway, we got what we got. 2016 came out. I watched it. I think I saw it actually first time. I didn't see it in theaters. I saw it a couple months after it had come out because I kind of wanted to wait a little while. I didn't want there to be as much like going on because I wanted to just let my brain, detox from the people saying things on good and bad sides on either side and just kind of see it for what it was. And I ended up watching it and being like, it just didn't.
I love everybody in it. I love Chris Hemsworth. I love Melissa McCarthy.
Most of the cast. I wouldn't say all of them, but most of the cast I was very big fans of. But it just felt off. The tone felt off. It felt zany. The humor didn't. Most of the time, it didn't land. It felt very predictable and just very flat. And it felt like a Disney ride. Like it felt like everything again that the first film, the Ghostbusters, thematically was pushing against, which is this like glossy, nice, pristine, put together project. Everything felt like checking all these boxes and everything, and it just went completely against that. And I think, moving now into talking about Ghostbusters Afterlife, this one feels rough, and it feels good and bad. There's good elements to that in my mind. There's bad elements to that. It feels though very much more in line tonally with the original theme.
Yeah, it's very slow, but all the information comes out organically, which makes it feel more like a 80s movie or where they took their time and presented you a product.
Yeah, there was a couple moments where I don't know if it was the editing or the shot. Well, it was probably editing, but there was a couple ways that they cut it that felt very jarring and a little bit like, ooh, that doesn't seem quite right. And there was a couple things that were in this film, Afterlife, that felt very like, well, we just have to appeal to fans. People that love the original Ghostbusters, so we're going to include those. We can talk more about it in the spoiler section.
There's also a couple characters that I feel like didn't need to be in the film.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah.
They just slowed things down. They didn't really serve a purpose. But
Agreed. Yeah.
Other than that, when I was leaving, there was a kid outside the theater, and he looks right at me and he goes, "I'm going to see the Ghostbusters." I said, "Oh, have you seen the old ones?" "No." So my hope is that he sees this one and goes, "I really like that, Dad." And Dad goes, "We should watch the originals."
Yeah, that'd be fun. Yeah, go back and kind of check out the original ones.
It's kind of the purpose of a reboot, right? Reboot the sales of the old ones. And
probably. Yeah. I mean, I think this was good enough. It's doing moderately well at the box office. It's not like blowing them out of the water. I think the big difference between this one and the 2016 one is the budget's like half of what the 2016 one was. So even though it's not blowing it out of the water, it's probably going to be good enough to make them some good money, especially when it gets into like home rentals, DVD, DVD, Blu-ray.
What's that?
What was that?
Rentals.
Yeah, rentals, exactly. Yeah, that sounds like DVD. I meant like streaming and everything.
Yeah,
I think this one's going to have a hard time living up to the originals in the way that we are talking about the original Ghostbuster almost 40 years later.
Yeah,
I don't think people are going to be crawling to watch this one 40 years from now.
I would agree with that. Like when I left the theater, I went, do I want to see another one of these? Like, do I want to see a fourth Afterlife 2 or whatever they're going to to call it? Like post Afterlife
films coming out. Like, is anybody going to care? There's a handful of them.
Some, like Interstellar, I still talk about that. I'm assuming I'll still talk about that.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But those are original films.
Right. Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But like, is anybody going to care about Indiana Jones 5 when it comes out in 2025 or something?
I don't think so, because the bar is set so high by the original content.
Yeah.
You're never going to.
I still talk about Indiana Jones 4. I mean, because of how awful it was at times. Look, it's a skull. It does things. Like every time at the end of the movie where they put the skull in front of something, they're like, oh, look, it opened a thing. It's like,
yeah, but
it's been that way the whole movie, guys.
Right.
But what's so crazy is 3 was amazing.
Yeah, 3 was great.
It really added a new element. Like it's possible.
Yeah.
They just aren't doing it.
Yeah.
I would say he's also 82 now, but I liked him in Star Wars, so.
Yeah. I think we were all comfortable with the idea that they would include some sort of child in his legacy. You know what I mean? Like he's going to have a kid. That kind of made sense. I know.
LaBeouf.
Right, but they just did such a poor job.
Pulled out his tooth.
Right, but they just did such a poor job with the character. Like he didn't have to be insufferable. He
didn't have to be Jar Jar Binks.
Yeah, he was like the doofy.
No, I actually like Shia LaBeouf. I like the character in it, and now it's like
I liked him, but I didn't like him as Indiana Jones's son.
He was a good actor too.
Yeah, like if he was just
that. They were building him up to be like the next.
Yeah, they were trying to. I think they were trying to turn it into like Indiana Jones's kid, and I just don't think that they did a good job. Like the whole thing about Indy, like when they did all the flashbacks. I don't know why we're talking about Indiana Jones right now. But when they did all the flashbacks to
Afterlife,
to Indiana Jones, like, you know, young Indy, they had that in the third film.
River Phoenix.
Yeah.
Wow.
Then in those moments where they did those flashbacks, you get a sense that like he was the same person back then, and he was a decent kid. He was fighting for what was right. Like he's trying to save the
dog, Indy.
Yeah. But like the whole idea was like, and he turned into that adult version of it. Like he had good principles that led him into having good principles as an adult. You don't want to think of like Indiana Jones's son, who's supposed to take the helm, as being this like greasy haired, you know, biker kid that's like, you know, disrespects everybody. Yeah. Like you're supposed to take on the mantle of this character that we've seen be this like good, upright, like it would have made more sense if he was angry. Like if he was a decent kid, but he was angry at Indy because he wasn't around as a father, right? Like that would have made more sense to me. And then I'm like, okay, you're like a good heir. It didn't even have to be a son. It could have been a daughter. I would have been fine with it.
We talked about this with the James Bond too, where you can't be the new James Bond by destroying the old one.
Exactly. Right. And that's what it's like. Kind of felt like. I mean, sort of, yeah. So it never really felt like he stepped into the mantle, Shia LaBeouf, of being a good new replacement for Indiana Jones. But I know they're working on 5 now, and if any of the story elements are true, it's going to be a very interesting ride. I don't know if we'll see if that's actually the case. They're talking about time travel and stuff in it, which is, it's
going to be a multiverse. That's a hot word right now.
Yeah. You lost me when you survive a nuclear explosion.
Oh yeah,
that was in a freaking refrigerator.
That taught me if there's ever a nuclear fallout, like to get in the fridge and hope for the best.
That's like a bold way to start the film. It's like we're going to start the film with a nuclear explosion that Indiana Jones survives, and then he's going to survive getting beat up. It's like, wait, what? It's like, how do you can't really build up to something from there. I mean, I guess aliens are a good direction to go with nuclear bombs, but I wasn't down personally for the whole sci-fi alien element in Indiana Jones. I always much more like the whole like
artifact.
Yeah, keep it on Earth. Keep it with, you know, like artifacts and spirits and things
cave
like that.
Dwellers.
I would have even been fine with like ghosts, like Scooby-Doo it with Indiana Jones, but like not aliens. Like that's just not the realm. Like keep aliens with Star Wars and don't mix
I guess the
call this archaeology.
Yeah. To tie that into Afterlife, Ghostbusters, I would say they didn't have to destroy the Ghostbusters to make this film enjoyable.
Right. And it really felt like that was the case. They felt like they did their homework in trying to honor where the franchises come from. And that doesn't mean that they couldn't, because these are ragtag guys in the original series that are faulty, they have problems. That doesn't mean that they have to end up in the best place. Mm-hmm. Like they can end up in bad places, which we saw, but do that in an honoring way.
Right.
You know, don't do that in a way where it's like changing their character just because you have to have them, you know, out of luck or in a bad spot. And I felt like that was everything that they explained with where their characters wound up, for the most part, made sense, which was really good to me. So do you guys have any thoughts on like your expectations going into this?
Zero.
And
okay. Only because you guys wanted to review it that I said, I'll still see it. Because again, A-list, I'll go. It doesn't matter to me. But like, I didn't really look into anybody else's opinion of it. You know, like even though I was going to try to go that Thursday, but I ended up seeing it Monday too. So I really didn't look online to see what people thought of it. Like it seemed to be doing well. So I was like, maybe. But zero expectations going in because I knew they can't touch what that first film was.
Yeah,
I think I'm more in line with Dave too, where the ship had kind of sailed.
Yeah,
and so especially after the 2016 one, where I'm just like, I don't care anymore.
It's such a perfect story. It's perfectly handled. It's gosh.
Yeah, it was sad because it's like 2016 Ghostbusters really missed an opportunity in my mind. You know, it could have been this, which I think overall is a better film. It's better constructed, but they wanted to do a reboot. They wanted to, you know, restart it with the whole new generation, and because of that, it just, you know, it missed. So it's kind of sad to me because I think it burned a lot of bridges. You know,
it wasn't gonna change my life either way, even if it was freaking brilliant. You know, like.
It's one of those things, we keep referencing older movies because they're kind of remaking them all now. We've reached that age where they're taking our childhood and revamping. But in the same way, if you told me right now, hey, they just announced another Star Wars episode's coming out, I would just go, I don't really care. Right.
Yeah, at
And
this
so that's
point.
kind of how I felt about Ghostbusters. I didn't really care. But then I saw that Reitman
Mhm.
had a hand in it. And I started thinking, okay, well, maybe this will be better, a better shot at it anyway.
Yeah,
But,
I appreciate it for what it was, and I like the fact that we have this film now with where the series, if it never has any more content, it feels like, okay, what's a satisfying conclusion
Mhm.
to at least kind of wrap things up here versus what happened with the 2016
Right.
one. And then prior to that, this whole like, are they going to make more? Should they make more? Well, we can't. One of our characters passed away, unfortunately. Like it's just a more nice way of wrapping it up, and it's got some touching moments in it as well, which I thought was very nice. So, I'm trying to think if there's anything else we should talk about before we get into the spoiler talk a bit more.
I wasn't super impressed with this. I like to talk about the sound a lot. The surround sound mix wasn't anything crazy. There's nothing that stood out to me as being like, wow, that was a cool technique or different or pushing the envelope. It was pretty standard. I did like the soundtrack. A lot of elements from the original included in there, including like the tones of the synth waves and actually some of the melodies and instrumentation used.
Yeah.
So that appealed to me.
I felt like I could really tell a difference between the new stuff and the old stuff.
Mhm.
Like you could tonally just sense like, oh, this is an old soundtrack piece. This is a new soundtrack piece. And that was a bit off for me, but I did like that they included the old soundtrack stuff. Sorry.
I was going to say, like the new movie Afterlife is a digital representation of those sounds.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. Whereas those old sounds were actually those old sounds.
Yeah. I felt so this goes more into I think the directing type thing. I felt like some of the characters were a bit hard to read.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly just for reasons of like, in any given scene, I didn't necessarily get a strong sense of kind of like their motivation.
Right. And then, like I said, there's a couple in there that I don't think even needed to be in the movie.
Correct. But, yeah. And they kind of they almost felt like a bit cameo-ish in a certain sense, even though there was a lot of cameos. But I think the standout for this was the main girl. I'm trying to...
McKenna something.
Oh, wow. I'm loading things on my computer. My computer's messed up right now. I'm telling you.
Can't think of her last name. McKenna something.
Yeah, the young girl.
Or Mackenzie something.
Yes, she did just such a good job.
McKenna Grace.
Yes, McKenna Grace as Phoebe.
Phoebe, yeah, that's it.
She did something that I find a lot of adult actors even can't do very well, which is to be the most intelligent person in a given setting, but also not come across as like a complete jerk, like know-it-all. And that's something that's hard for a lot of adult actors to do. And I see that all the time with kid actors. Like whenever they cast a kid to be like the smart kid in a project, they're always inevitably like completely disrespectful, completely, more capable than all the adults that are around them. They've got everything. Basically, their limitations are all external. It's other people are causing them all these problems. Her role in the film and her acting job in the film really did an effective job of being like, she's smart, but with that intelligence comes weakness because she's too smart.
Right.
And it gets her into trouble. And she's so smart that she doesn't understand emotions. It's all logic and understanding. And that can help her. But at other times that can really mess her up because when she does have a big emotional moment, she doesn't know how to handle it. She doesn't know how to. And there was like numerous times in the film where she's almost explaining, like, I'm sorry, I'm not more excited. I just don't know how to deal with this because I don't express my emotions normally. And like, that's something I don't see even in adult actors very often. So it's like that if she hadn't been in the film, I think this would have been a much worse film for me in a lot of ways.
Agreed.
Because she just had a heart to the film that really, and because of her relation to the story and the characters and everything like that, I think she did.
I wanted to touch on her and say that when the movie started, I was bummed that the original Ghostbusters are adults, right? They're scientists doing this. And so it's like, okay, it's been reduced to children now and it's a child's comedy. But about 20 minutes in or so, I really started to like her character and her acting in the movie, which really sucked me in. And then I was just along for the ride with just kind of her. She is the main character of the whole thing.
Really is,
Right.
And I think she's kind of in a weird way taken over what Bill Murray was in the first two, because he was kind of the main character in the first two. Even though it spent individual time with the other actors, he still tended to be the focus of everything.
The movie follows him.
It follows him.
Right.
But she just did an excellent job with that. I think the other characters, and this was more of a negative for me, detractor, they didn't really have a kind of an arc that they were going on. They did a little bit, but all their arcs tended to be, well, I'm dealing with what has happened in the past, I guess I would say. And their arc was kind of like, well, they get a little bit of a closed door with that. They get resolution to that sort of dark past. But even with them, it's like, you've got the mom who had the husband that's maybe a bad guy. She wasn't really clear. Like if he was a bad guy, he kind of was, but he kind of wasn't. And, she's struggling because of finances, but they never really talk about why she's struggling with finances.
Or where he went.
Yeah, or where he went. She's just kind of dealing with that. So it's like, I know it's kind of spoilery, but I'm just trying to explain, like, to me, none of the characters felt as relatable or connectable as Phoebe did in the script.
And she did a good job.
Yeah. And you have Finn Wolfhard, which was her older brother, and he was just, whatever. He's like the teenager that wants to get a girlfriend and be a little rambunctious and everything like that. And he was just kind of a vehicle character. He kind of just drove the plot along, as was that. He was there at times to do the things that basically Phoebe couldn't accomplish or podcast. I do think he was a detractor. He was a negative for me, podcast Logan Kim, not as an actor, but as his role in it. I just found him a little grating at times. Like it was a little bit too much of like, oh yeah, he carries around this like giant podcast gear. And maybe because we do podcasting, it just seemed a little,
I guess for his character,
I love that character.
Yeah.
But
I think they did a good job of not showing modern technology in the film.
Yeah.
So kind of makes it timeless in that aspect.
Yeah.
So maybe that's why the podcast character only has a microphone.
Yeah.
But you would think in 2021, they'd be like, well, what's your name? My name's YouTube series.
Right.
I film everything.
Yeah, not podcast. I mean, most kids don't. Yeah, there's not a lot of kids that are excited about podcasting. You know what I mean? And it's not like
it's a kid out in the middle of nowhere. It's maybe limited, whatever,
That's what my wife said. Given the state of the town, there probably wasn't a lot of technology around anyway.
And I was willing to give them that, you know what I mean? Because we always have that weird.
But it's a real different, wanting to be on YouTube is something totally different than wanting to have like a radio show, which I equated it more to like, radio broadcast almost.
It's more of like, I associate that podcasting with an adult conspiracy theory nut. And he even talks about how he's really into conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
But he's such a young kid. It doesn't, in my opinion, make a
but I like their
Sense.
friendship. It was really.
What was he getting from doing the pod? And I think what would have helped for him would have been like if we took a moment to go to his house and you see that like his parents are either nutballs or they're completely don't talk to him. He's like basically spends all his time alone.
How great would it be if parents were deaf and he was just like, this is how I entertain myself.
Yeah, it's like there was a reason for him to be that way because he's so young. I needed a bit more.
That's all the characters that you needed. A lot more.
Yeah. So, so all that being said, I think overall I had a good time watching the film. There was definitely moments where I got taken out. There's a couple cuts where it was like the camera angles almost like they didn't understand the right way to cut from a line of dialogue to a different action almost. And it felt very jarring. And then I'm trying to think if there's anything else that stood out. I mean, the special effects were fine. I didn't think there were.
There's some of the practical effects, which I want to give them props for doing because nobody does practical stuff anymore except Interstellar, which we were talking about.
Yeah.
But it almost looks dated now to do practical, or the other way around where the digital stuff, the CGI used to make it look dated. Yeah. Now the practical makes it look dated.
I would agree.
A lot of it just looked cheap to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The sets, everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't think the sets, but a lot of the
looked like it looked like a fan film.
If you think about the giant farmhouse in the middle of nowhere, what can you tell me about that farmhouse other than there was a living room with a chair in it?
Yeah.
Like, did we ever see the kitchen? Was there an upstairs? Where did they sleep?
No, but I wasn't.
For a 2-hour movie, you think you'd get some kind of.
They showed the bedroom.
I was amazed by how they kept discovering things like over the course of days. Yeah. Like, oh, there's a pole that. Sorry, I don't want to spoil it, but it's like there's a pole that goes down into a basement that has all this stuff. It's like you didn't. Like when you
day one,
I feel like day one you get there, you walk the property and go like, okay, there's this weird pole that goes down into this room, and
I guess the son did from Stranger Things, where he's like, I found a bunch of junk outside.
Yeah, sort of. I just figured, there's nothing else going on. They're literally just sitting in the house because they have nowhere else to go. It's like you're gonna.
I just think about other movies that are that length where it's like they give you an abundance of context.
Yeah, well, it felt like what they were going for was like the house was a character in itself. It's like the dirt house up on the hill. Like it was going for this house as a character, but they never did enough to really substantiate it as its own character. Like they never had like they're going around and exploring the different rooms of the house and encountering like turning on the pipes and the water's like, blah, 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 and shakes and comes out dirty.
With
and
the character.
Yeah, and like there's a wall that, maybe they push on a wall and it like falls in or something. They never had that moment. It was more of just like, wow, this house is bad. And then there's a chair. And
take our word for it.
Yeah, exactly. Take our word for it. I could have used a little bit more of that, I think.
And like Dave said, so apply that theory to all of the characters.
Yeah.
Except maybe the main girl.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what's wrong with the film. I still think it's a good movie. It's missing a lot of that stuff for me.
It's the depth. You're looking for that deeper stuff from it. So let's give it a rating, each of us, and then we can do a little bit of spoiler talk.
Ross, go ahead.
As a fan of Ghostbusters, I still think it's a must-see. I'm going to give it a 92.
Wow, that's really good. That is really high. Wow, That's awesome. What about you, sir?
40.
40.
Yeah.
That's the lowest we've had.
Holy cow. What did you... oh my gosh, that's ridiculous. Crazy.
Let's let him explain it since it's so low.
I think you should explain, yeah.
It's just so many... I mean, without going into spoilers, I just had a lot of problems with it. It was just so...
Okay.
I guess like we were talking earlier about the level of comedy in the first one.
Yeah.
Where it was working on so many levels and it had the story this flawless story.
Yeah.
This one just had so many problems with it, and it was just trying too hard for sentimental things and then the third act. That was just really ruined it for me.
Huh. Well, I'll look forward to hearing more about your thoughts on that when we get into spoiler talk, because that's a harsh review.
You're going to average
it's
this
like
out.
an F minus there.
But it sounds bad, but like those are all technical things. I did enjoy some of it, but
I'm just thinking about it from a production standpoint. Like, I would give a movie like Birdemic, an F, like a 40. Like, the sound's bad, the visuals are bad, the acting's bad.
Oh, so if 60 is a failing, maybe I'll say 60.
Okay, that's
Seems
more reasonable,
like a D minus just because they took the time to make it.
You didn't even put your name on it.
That's basically what that's like a 40 comes across as like, they didn't even roll the camera at the right time.
They gave you 10%.
They cut in halfway through his take, or something.
Right.
Did you not use the number 2 pencil, son?
That's like sheer ineptitude in filmmaking levels.
Scantron just didn't pick up your answer.
I would give it, I thought long and hard about this. As a fan, I would give it a higher rating, but as like a reviewer critic style thing, I think I'd give it an 83. Just because of some of the stuff we talked about and we can get kind of more into.
Which I think most people are going to go lower that haven't seen the originals.
Yes.
Like even in the movie, she says, you didn't know that, the Ghostbusters were a thing? And she goes, that happened 20 years before I was born.
Yeah.
How many kids are going to see this that don't even maybe know what Ghostbusters are?
I think, I agree.
Which will lead to lower scores, I think.
Yeah. It's
that's who they were targeting to me.
Right.
Yeah.
I think you nailed it where, hey, now my dad's going to show me the original.
I hope.
But he's not going to because of its comedy.
Yeah. Which is sad, right?
And then they're going to sit through it together and the dad's going to cringe because
he's going to go, oh, I don't remember Bill Murray almost taking advantage of a possessed girl.
My son doesn't remember this or the BJ scene with Dan Aykroyd. I'm like, holy crap.
It's got some pretty strong adult. It's not a film for kids. It really shouldn't have been a PG.
Bustin' makes me feel good.
Yeah. It really shouldn't have been a PG
but
film.
I miss those days. Like I'm
like,
not a parent, so I can't really say.
Yeah.
But I would want my kids to be like, on Christmas or that time of year, we watch Gremlins. And
Yeah.
And I know that's inappropriate, but I also grew up with it and I'm fine.
Yeah. We've kind of lost that PG-13 level.
It did, like comedy. I'm saying, it's over your head and you'll get it 10 years from now.
Like when I saw RoboCop as a kid, I don't think I even realized that guy was going to do horrible things to that woman and RoboCop shot him in the junk.
Oh, yeah, I don't know.
Right. But as an adult, I look at that and go, wow, that went right over my head as a kid.
What? No, that hit. Every one of those things hit. And I saw that in the theater too.
Yeah.
Ma'am, you have suffered an emotional shock. I will notify a rape crisis center.
Brilliant stuff, man. Brilliant.
Awesome. Well, let's move into spoiler talk. So with that, if you don't want to hear any spoilers for the new Ghostbusters Afterlife, go ahead and turn off the podcast now. Go ahead and sorry. Yeah. Yeah. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And that never happens in the movie.
Ivan Reitman dies, I guess. I don't know.
in the first act.
Sadly, very quickly. I mean, seeing him, we'll just hop right into that, I guess. Seeing him
Wait, you talking
was
about Harold
weird.
Ramis?
Yeah, Harold Ramis.
I do at the beginning when they're hiding his face. I was like, that is so respectful. I like it.
Yeah.
You know, like I know he's dead. I know he's not in the movie.
Yeah.
I thought that was super respectful. And then they kind of changed it on me at the end. But
yeah. So to clarify, yes, Harold Ramis is who I was joking about. Is, you know, in the film he's deceased, right? So
And in life,
which is sad. And Ivan Reitman is not dead. I should stop making that joke because people are like, it's going to start trending on Twitter or something. And they're like, probably not. But, you know, it was a very touching way, I think, to, again, if you're a fan of the originals, you're going to go, well, how do we get the original cast together?
Mhm.
And there's almost, and I was like really thinking, I'm like, there's almost no other way than to turn him into a ghost. But it fits because we're living in a film universe where there are ghosts and there are dead people and stuff. The only thing that didn't really make a ton of sense to me was why he was a human ghost. Because most of the other ghosts you see,
even the humans,
are like
demons.
like demons.
But it just happened if his body wouldn't decompose.
Yeah, but like, the crazy cab driver, right? That's sitting at the counter
With the
that she pours the
skeleton.
Yeah,
skeleton.
but
It's
I'm
like, why is he there? And
Mhm.
why is he a skeleton? I mean,
Well,
that
he was a
more of
miner from 1929.
No, he was a cab driver in the movie, but like they put that in. That was in the
the
original, right? So he
original.
was a callback, a harken back from the original. But like you have a floating ghost metal eating creature in this one, like, and then in the original you had Slimer. So it's like those aren't, in my opinion, they're not people.
Even when they showed the librarian who looked human, I want to say she
then
was
she
floating
freaked out in a little.
Yeah, but then she goes, "Rah!" and
Right.
she like turns into like she had a human form, but it was
Right.
almost like because she wanted to be a librarian, but she was actually some
Anyway, there are a
demonic
lot more
ghost creature.
problems than Harold Ramis.
Well, I'm just saying, I was okay with it, even though it didn't fit within the realm of what I felt like was possible in the Ghostbusters
Yeah.
world, you know?
And they did the right thing by starting off with an action scene. That's kind of how things have to be now. Books,
Yeah.
movies, everything, right?
Yeah.
So
And I thought it was funny the way that he died was like failing.
Yeah.
Because it's like they're always that's the kind of the Ghostbusters thing is like we fail upward,
Fail up,
you know,
yeah.
and for once it didn't fail up, which
Mm-hmm.
was very sad in the sense of how you end up figuring out what was happening in that overall scene. It was a very confusing beginning in a lot of ways because you're like, why is he doing, what is that, what? And I felt like it paid off well. That was
Mhm.
one thing that was nice. The setup and the payoff to the initial scene was handled very nicely. Trying to think about some other, I mean, do you want to tell us about all of the awfuls of the horrible Ghostbusters Afterlife?
just the story. I mean, the fact that they saved the world, much less New York. That story just would not die. You know, you still remember the Challenger exploding. You still remember these huge events in movie history. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
The fact that they needed to tap into the cult status.
Yeah.
Even if it fell by the wayside. That's why I like the podcast dude. Podcast dude should have known about the Ghostbusters.
For sure.
And then him and Paul Rudd's character could have bonded more over that. And then it'd been like, then they could have been more astonished that that's his granddaughter, you know?
Yeah. It made
Like
sense to me.
It didn't even, when he told them about Ghostbusters, there's not a scene where she actually has some type of recognition that that's her grandfather.
yeah, she doesn't recognize him.
She doesn't
like,
recognize
she's
him.
never seen a picture
Yeah,
of
she
him.
hasn't.
Right?
I think her mom very clearly hated him,
Mhm.
so she probably never
But-
talked about him at all.
What's his last name?
Who?
Spangler.
Spangler?
Spangler
Yeah.
is on his jumpsuit.
Right.
I mean, just like,
Well, I think that's when
you
she
didn't-
notices because then the ghost is helping her. And
it's
then
like her mom doesn't even know what he did. Like,
Yeah.
he's just an asshole
she
that
does- yeah.
left me, you know?
that's what they say. She says, what kind of scientist was Grandpa? I don't know. Was he a physicist? No, he was a nutbag. He wasn't a nutbag. He was an asshole.
Yeah.
They say that
Yeah.
in there, right?
I think she knew he was, but it came across. I could have used a lot more conversation around their relationship.
Yeah.
Like I would have. Spangler wasn't a person that ever came across like he even wanted to have kids.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like he never
Like-
looked at me like
She
who's
should have.
who's the mom? Like where's the
mom-
grandma?
I
right?
love Carrie Coon, by the way. She's
Yeah.
awesome and everything.
Yeah.
But I'm like, she should have known who her dad was.
Even if you hate him, you're going to keep tabs, right?
Yeah, and then somehow wanting to keep that away from your children. And then when your children finds out, you could have had a scene to kind of confront who he was. It's like, yeah, he was.
Yeah, what would have helped me a lot was again a bit more of an explanation of like their backstory. Like, where was the big falling out? What happened?
Peter Venkman
right.
went into academics.
Was Spangler an absent father? But then it looked like, no, he wasn't, because when you see the photos of her at the end, it looked like he was very much involved. Like, he had a ton of images and photos of her. So it was like, well, what was going on specifically with
what
that?
What did Dan Aykroyd,
right.
Why did he have a tattoo and work at a bookshop?
But I don't think that was...
Well, I think that was in the other one.
So in my mind, that never came across as like, well, this is a plot hole. It came across as more of like, we just needed to do more of a deep dive into that.
Agreed.
It felt like there would be appropriate reasons for that, but they never did give those reasons. And so to me, that's more of like, I would have liked to have seen that more, but not like, oh my gosh.
It's a sequel, but literally you have a 2-minute. Are we in spoilers?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have a 1-minute cameo of the original cast that show up at the last minute and cross the streams, and that's it. Like,
yeah, I
really
thought,
like
I didn't like the retread aspect of this. I didn't like that it was like,
why did it have to be Zool and the two dogs?
I would have been fine with the idea of it being connected to Zool. Like, it could have been some like
Gozer, you mean? Oh yeah,
same thing.
Yeah,
Gozer
Zool. Yeah,
I don't know.
I would have been fine with it being like of the same religion. Like, this is another god within that, group of gods or something like that, and they built these carvings, but they never really went into detail of the carvings. Like, at least in the original one, you got an explanation that like, oh, this is that, and that comes from this, and that's, it's like with the painting in the second one, it's like, oh, there's this guy who's this famous person, and
that was different. I remember, they didn't feed off of the negative energy of New York or something. It's like, that's good enough.
Yeah, I would have been happier with a more disassociated plot.
On this one, and we keep talking about this in all of our reviews about movies that over spoon feed you, versus not enough.
Yeah,
I would say this is not enough. They show the guy in the coffin, the glass coffin, and you kind of have to piece together, okay, that's the guy that owned the mine.
Mm-hmm.
So did he make those carvings? Because then when Gozer comes, he's like, my queen or my goddess of gods, I built this place for you. But that's it. Like, that's the only time they talk about.
He wasn't needed. Like, honestly, you could have cut his character.
And they only say his name once when they say all the miners were jumping into the hole.
Yeah.
They call it the can't tell you the name curse.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that would have been fine if they had basically like.
Why not in the coffin put like, here lies dude?
Yeah,
well, his name was on there.
I would have been fine if it was like Spangler was doing
yeah.
research and he found out about these ruins that had been uncovered in this random place. And so he went out to investigate those. And while he was out there investigating those, he died.
Right.
Like, that would have been a much more. And then you still could have had his daughter being upset at him because she was like, he was already a distant father. And then he was so obsessed with ghost hunting and all this other stuff. And then he just disappeared and died versus like he just up and moves. Like, they never really explained that. Like, why would you just not take your like, I get maybe because you're trying to protect them. But they made it seem almost like...
Would they have been an immediate threat if they lived there?
Yeah, but...
Or danger.
And they made it seem more like he just, like, left his family. He didn't explain it. He just took all the Ghostbuster gear and took off and did his own thing. And it was just like... it all felt a little forced. Right. I think that's the best
But
way
I
that
do like that, okay, it happened in 1984, and, it's been prophesied that it is going to happen again. And he understood that, and he went to where that was, and he set up the auto turrets to keep it at bay.
For sure.
What I don't understand is the ghost that he catches at the beginning that gets out, that Paul Rudd lets out.
Yeah.
Gary or whatever. How does that affect the timing of that volcanic eruption or whatever of Ghost?
Of the original one?
Yeah, remember at the very beginning, he captures a ghost. The girl
so
finds
that's the keymaster, right? So he
Is
caught.
it?
I thought that's because basically you have the two dogs which have to come together in order for Gozer to be
I guess
born,
that makes sense.
right?
That's why it was in the grocery store before it actually.
They didn't explain it very well, but basically he caught one of them, which prevented her from being born, or whatever that god is, from being born, because one of them was locked up. So then when they let it out, then that reactivated basically the the process of the god to come back into the world. And so why that was happening when it was very briefly summarized by saying that like there's specific years on the calendar that when those years hit, that's when this is going to take place.
Right.
But it was a little bit forced. Again, it was like, okay, so there's just like specific years that occur because of reasons that allow for this thing to it's not like there's all the planets align every 10
Right.
years and it creates this
Or like some
Juju
mathematical sequence. It just so happens. It was like, well, in 84, we had a big hit. So in 2021, we're also trying to have a
that's
big
what
hit.
it just seemed like to me. Yeah.
Exactly.
I thought it would have been funny if they
Yeah.
put
I kept looking to see what
2016
the
up there.
next year was going to
Yeah.
be, but they never showed it.
They didn't. Yeah. So
2022.
but again, I think a lot of it felt very
Yeah, no Fibonacci sequences.
So this movie was supposed to come out in 2020.
I think so. Yeah. They
Did
edited
they
that.
change that number?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
Interesting.
I
So again, I
didn't-
mean, that's how everything in this movie feels, though, where it's like it's going to come out in 2020.
Yeah.
In 1984, this happened, and in 2020, it's supposed to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, 2021.
again, none of that
38 years and 6
necessarily.
months.
Again, none of that necessarily is like a giant plot hole in my mind.
No.
It just feels basic. It feels too simple. It feels like
It's what a
they
coincidence.
didn't write the coincidences of the forcing, which I'm more okay with. Like with Last Jedi, not to again harken on that because there's probably listeners that like that movie. There was legitimate plot holes that you're like, now why did they know about that? Or how did that happen? Or what was that? That literally there was no answer for unless you have to just completely stretch
Right.
the reality that could have been. You have to just come up with stuff, right? And this one, it's like everything is relatively explained. It just doesn't feel very
And all this,
Enough as
None
an
of it makes
explanation.
sense.
all the setups have
yeah,
payoffs.
you have this land in the house and it's worthless. I was like, what? Have you seen house prices lately?
Exactly. We're
Holy
up
crap.
25.7% year to
Yeah,
year.
I lived in Nebraska.
50
though.
acres of anything is going
I
to
don't
bring
know.
you in a crap ton of
I don't know.
money.
I lived in Nebraska, dude, and I mean it's a very different world. Like when we moved from I was born in Baltimore.
Worthless?
We lived in a
Why?
really bad neighborhood in Baltimore and had a really bad house. We moved into a small town for that area, which was about, I think at the time it was like close to 30,000 people, but it was a small town for that area. We got one of the best houses in the entire town. And that was, back then. And that's going from like a bad area in Baltimore to like the best house. So, I mean, if you go to a house, like that town looked like it was maybe at most a couple thousand people. I mean, and they're driving way out. It looked like way out in the middle. I mean, if you go to like Tonto Basin, you can get property and places out in Tonto Basin right now that are like
$4,000 an acre.
Yeah, it's really nothing because there's just nothing out there. So I get what you're saying.
You could have turned a profit on something that was given to you.
Yeah,
Like,
but he said he was in debt, so it's like the
It's just
moment you
another-
sell all that,
Oh,
it goes
that's
just
true.
to
That's
paying
true.
off the debt.
It's just
yeah.
another example, what Dave's saying, of how convenient all the information is.
Yeah,
Right?
it was a
I will
plot
say,
of convenience.
the
and-
reason I give
yeah.
this a higher score than Dave does, obviously, is because all the setups paid off.
Yeah.
All the jokes landed for me. I
Yeah.
laughed out loud quite a few times, even at
Yeah.
the really bad jokes, because they set up the fact that the jokes were going to be bad.
Yeah,
right.
You somehow made a Goonies sequel.
Yeah.
But with Ghostbusters
Hidden in the
characters.
It kind of felt like that. Yeah,
I
agree.
even thought the Asian kid was the Asian kid type in.
Oh,
that sounds
that's
bad, but you know what I
inappropriate.
mean?
Yeah, I'm just kidding. No, I
You
get
know
what
what
you're
I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that's why I loved all the kids'
Yeah.
camaraderie,
It-
and even the girl he was trying to date when she joins
Yeah.
in. I love that group setting, and it gave me that '80s vibe feel.
I think it
And
was
then the guy from Stranger Things doesn't hurt that, but it's like,
Yeah.
you had a bunch of kids, but then again, I was just sitting there thinking, this is a kids movie.
Yeah.
Why am I here? You know,
Mhm.
I think they did an okay
it
job.
wasn't bad, but it was like
It
they
kind of
turned it into a kids movie.
Felt like they had two characters. You have Podcast in there, and then you have the young girl Phoebe.
But that's what I mean. I
And
love their friendship.
they
but
had a
worked
good
like
friendship. And they were the most caricature-ish, right? Phoebe's this
Yeah.
extreme version of like no emotion but intelligence, and then Podcast is this like silly, fast talking kind of like, hey, listen to this and character. But then everybody else was kind of just
Bland.
bland, normal. And that, I think the cool thing about the original Ghostbusters is that they all kind of had their own a little bit character within it. Like Bill Murray, they were all crazy in their own way, but like, you know, Bill Murray's like the headstrong, you know, fast talking, you know, deal cracking kind of guy. And then you have Spangler, who's like the super intelligent scientist that, again, you know, has no emotion.
And a jerk.
Yeah, and the jerk. And then Dan Aykroyd is kind of like the I don't know how you'd explain him.
He still gets to
He's
be
the
that
nuts and
character.
bolts. He can actually bring all
He's-
this stuff
right.
together.
Yeah, he's
Like,
the practical.
you have the plans. I can actually build it.
I'm
Right.
gonna go get
You
the
know.
car.
Yeah, and
he
then-
gets the car, soups it up. Yeah.
And he
Yeah.
still has that character in this movie.
Yeah.
So does Bill Murray, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
It's just so
For the
short
1
lived.
minute he was in it.
Like when he's like, by the authority of Ohio and the, you know, something
Yeah.
about the retirement
That was
people
the
and
best thing,
fishing, hunting, and yeah.
I would say my favorite part of the movie was when they showed up.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because I was like, oh my gosh, it's the original cast. It was like they felt like themselves and they felt like good characters. And I thought it was like, it was a point of interest and fun to me.
It's just flat. It's just like a camera pan, and they're all there. It's a 3-shot, you know, then the four,
Yeah.
but it's like stand there, say your lines.
Well, what did you want
It
him
was
to
all-
do?
yeah, all of it.
Fly in on a parachute?
A
Like
half
what?
a day's work is
You
what
wanted
I'm
to come in on
saying.
a
They just
helicopter?
didn't-
Or?
No, they just
Okay.
didn't do anything. They just turned,
Right.
shot.
Yeah.
Oh, you're
left.
old. Why don't you lean against the car?
Yeah, I thought that was funny though. Like they had definitely aged.
Mhm.
Like, you know, you could tell that they were like, oh, I'm too old for this
Mhm.
crud. And, you know, they even did like the, you know, like the streams crossing isn't working. And like that, they all had their quirks and they all interacted just as well. I felt like as a team as they had before.
They still played the same characters. That's
yeah.
what I appreciated.
And I mean, I don't.
Even Bill
I-
Murray's like, we could have really been something, you and
Yeah.
I. We could have been the power couple, but you were all about
You were
pillaging
all
and
about
baby-
pillaging. Oh, his lines of
Yeah,
dialogue
that was
were,
great.
were as
Yeah.
hilarious as they were in the
and
first
then,
one.
and then that ramps up to, are you a god?
Yeah.
And he's like, Ray.
Yeah.
Because in the first one. you know?
Absolutely. He's like, yes. Yeah. I thought it was good because it actually showed that they'd grown as people. Like the part where he's vamping her and he's like, well, you could have been something.
Mhm.
And then she attacks him and he was like, oh, I guess my talking so much this time didn't work. It actually shows you that they've grown as people to be well enough aware of like how they did this in the past and how it worked for them and how it's not working for them now. It was like so much was accomplished to me in just that short period of having them on screen. I didn't need much more than that, especially if they're going to move this on to like keeping it about Phoebe and podcast and
I
Trevor.
I thought the death of Egon
Yeah.
would have brought the other two together.
Which they just
Then-
explain away with, well, he kept talking about how the world was going to end, so we got mad at him.
Have
Yeah.
this big fallout.
I
But
didn't
his
agree with
death
that, yeah.
would have brought them all there. Then they could
See, that's
help
way
the
better.
the children discover who their granddad was and not just this a-hole.
Right.
They-
Start the movie with Harold Ramis capturing the thing,
Yeah.
dying.
Yeah.
Right. Then
And
at the
realizing-
funeral, Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Hudson are
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Right.
I would have been fine with that. I think they
And
could
they
have been.
find a book and they're like,
Again,
oh,
just
And
wasn't
now
developed enough in my
imagine-
mind.
Imagine somebody like a conspiracy theory, like Paul Rudd's character or podcast,
Yeah.
trying to be so excited about Peter Venkman, and imagine Bill Murray's delivery on those quips.
yeah.
I don't
Brilliant.
think, but like
it would write itself.
I don't think that they needed to have excitement around the original character because the thing was, and they showed this, and I think is accurate. You know, this was all taking back in the 1980s. People didn't have camera phones. They didn't have the ability to just put this stuff on the internet and then everybody's going to see it. It's like this was something that happened in a very limited area of the country for like one or two times.
Wait,
and they
New
didn't-
York or
Yeah, New York, and they didn't have a lot of video footage documenting it.
yeah.
So it's like,
Na-
so it makes
national
sense that
news. There's coverage of it. It's
yeah,
on
but it
YouTube.
made sense again. Like it living in this universe, are you going to be aware of everything that happens before you were born in a completely different part of the country? That
I guess it from
you know,
Right, but
that's-
I'm saying like
that's
huge
not like-
events are archived. You know what I mean? I'm just saying that wouldn't have been a conspiracy theory. Like, did the building actually blow up?
I would have had a problem with them being like, oh well, ghosts. You know, ghosts
see
don't exist. We have no proof that ghosts exist because obviously they've in this universe at least know that ghosts exist and they've seen them. But nobody did that. It was just more like this is a crazy series of events that happened in a completely different time period that I have no association with. Those guys weren't celebrities anymore. They weren't famous. They, like they said, they slowly petered out. They didn't have a lot of work coming in anymore. So it's like,
it would have been better as a conspiracy, like Dave said, if you just had a crazy guy that was like, it wasn't a massive gas leak and everybody was hallucinating. This really happened. The ghosts were there.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure podcasts knew about the Ghostbusters. Maybe I'm wrong about that.
Not before
he showed them the video.
But he's into conspiracy. That was the joke I liked the most when he's like, "Wait, you're the podcast." Blah, blah, blah,
that was funny.
He's like,
I really caught his voice.
You're my subscriber.
Yeah.
You know, it really hit its stride.
voice in
episode
46 or whatever it was.
Yeah, but those are the kind of jokes I like because that implies, he only had one.
I guess I would say there's two ways to look at it. Was this a direct sequel, or were the original characters in this for a tribute? If it was a tribute, then it's fine.
I agree. Yeah, I think it's a good tribute. It's a reboot in my mind. That tributes the original. And so it's like, you can't have it so closely associated with the first series of films and stories that it doesn't stand on its own. And so I was comfortable with the idea because, again, 1984, it was a limited series of events that took place. They weren't internationally known celebrities for the most part. They did a specific job for a specific time and some crazy events happened, but it's like there's terrorist attacks and crazy things that happened in America that I just sometimes find out about that happened years in the past, like this horrific shooting or, there's crazy things like that because I don't just go out there and look at, well, what happened in 1984 in New York that
Jeffrey Dahmer, who?
Yeah, well, you can make the case that like...
8 people?
You can make the case that
can't be real.
Podcasts would do that, right? But the other people don't really necessarily need to have done that. I don't think, we know of Jeffrey Dahmer because he's so famous and because he's been talked about in so many different other projects and different films and shows and different forms of media. These aren't guys that have had that happen. Like the Ghostbusters haven't had numerous different forms of media that have continued to talk about them and the impact. They didn't start an industry. They had a series of events. So to me, it was like, okay, it makes sense. It's a little bit of a stretch.
They would have been, like I said, died down and delegated to a Comic-Con appearance,
something like
as
that
themselves,
right? So something like that.
A picture with Peter Venkman for $50.
I mean, we have people out there talking about, like I saw a TikTok video that said Rome didn't exist, and like I saw a TikTok video, people, there's like so many conspiracy theories of like, well, this never happened and that never happened, and this doesn't. That's not true. It's like, and these are kids. These are young kids that are just starting to like learn more about the world. Branch out in the understanding of different things
Cash
and stuff.
Did not write her.
That it's like, it made sense to me because...
Well, in a world where there's infinite knowledge, there is no truth.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. But I think, for what it was a good touching tribute to them at that moment. And I think there are story elements and beats to it that probably could have been delved into deeper and maybe could have been fleshed out and would have taken them in a slightly better direction. Overall, though, nothing was so apparently like off to me that it took me out of the film. It made me go like,
there was only a couple.
Well, that's
where I got out of the film.
Yeah.
One was, why was she in summer school?
Yeah.
And what is summer school exactly? Watching Cujo and then him going to the back and do whatever.
But I didn't understand why she was in summer school.
I never understood why.
It should have been more like a daycare or something. I don't know.
Something like that. Like she needed to put her somewhere to basically keep her busy. Maybe there was a line that they talked about with that.
Yeah.
Why did podcasts stop doing the podcast?
Yeah, halfway through, he just kind of...
It's kind of like the Shang-Chi problem I have with that girl, where she just stopped being a character.
Or like, why did he put on those infrared goggles when he needed guided a remote control car?
And why did they not put the remote control car in the Ecto 1 when they left? Like they were racing it to get into the car, right?
Oh yeah,
that could bother.
Yeah,
but I'm just saying,
then you feel there's going to be things that you're just like, what? Why?
Goggles on. I'm like, no, are those night vision? Like,
I don't feel like it was an absurdly large amount of like plot holes. Again, summer school thing, right?
Convenient.
It could have been explained if somebody had just said like, oh yeah, I need to just have something to keep you busy.
Mom, we can't move out here. I got to finish school. If I don't finish school, they're going to send me to summer school. Oh, you have to do summer school here then.
Yeah.
What would that take me, 10 seconds?
Yeah, something like that. But they did other things. I mean, like Paul Rudd is a seismologist, and so that's why he was out there, because he was investigating. But again, you never expect, well, why is Paul Rudd even there to begin with? Like, how did he know about the seismic activity to begin with? Was it
And then
You
he
know?
says
Yeah,
something like,
were you already there and were so bored, and then you realized seismic activity?
Exactly. Yeah. I was like, where does he
why
come
was
from?
he the summer school teacher? And you can't say he's a teacher at the school because when he comes in, he says, I found this movie in your school.
Yeah.
In your school.
Yeah. He
wouldn't say
definitely
that.
came across as like, I'm just doing this for a job while I investigate
Right.
the seismic activity stuff. But again, it didn't feel like that was plot holes, more of just like convenience, plot
That's what you keep
convenience.
saying.
and-
Yeah. It was just convenient.
which lowered the rating for me. I mean, it's not, in my mind, that made it less enjoyable. And it made, because a good film, you're like, wow, that could happen. That could exist.
John Hughes type coming of age story with these kids.
Yeah.
And it just like, no, well, we actually are using it to do a Ghostbusters reboot.
I thought there was a good coming of age type feel
And
to
why
it,
was Carrie Coon's character like an alcoholic? Like, you're gonna go off on your dad for being an a-hole? And
Yeah.
you're like, she like talked about alcohol constantly.
The whole time.
Yeah, but
But that was
to me,
one
it
of
was
my
more of a joke. I didn't think that she was like an actual alcoholic. But I mean, they have to
Is that a
give
joke?
an explanation for why she can't keep a job, right?
Right. Or
So-
That's what
because
I'm
of money.
saying. I'm
She's
like,
kind of out of her luck,
but
poorly raised.
so it's not really your dad's fault. It's,
Yeah. It's your mom.
that's
alcoholic mom.
my whole thing.
She
Like,
did have the best joke in the movie, I thought, though, where the boy's like, I'm not getting any bars out here. She goes, there better be a bar out here.
yeah, that's
It's
funny
like
as
such an
hell.
obvious joke that I've never heard or thought of before.
Yeah.
It's funny.
I didn't like her character too much in the story. I felt like she kind of was forced. They have to have a parent, and it was kind of like the weakest set of connections to the overall plot, which is like, oh, well, I'm not a good parent, I guess, and I had a bad childhood, so I don't have any money, so we have to move to this town in the middle of nowhere, which, oh, by the way, is your grandfather's. That was a Ghostbuster. She didn't come across as a really good person in the script, but they tried to basically give her redemptive type points at the end where she's like, are you okay? Like, she's protecting her daughter,
And then
and she's trying to help fight the ghosts and stuff. So they like tried to give her redemption at the end, which felt good. But prior to that, you're kind of like,
and she wasn't a bad person, but
like her whole arc was my dad didn't care enough about me and abandon us. And that kind of wraps in when she goes down the pipe finally and sees all the images, and she gets that moment. And she even, I think, says that or was that Phoebe? One of them talks about how they felt like they got the closure that they needed.
I think she does.
Yeah. And
Because
Phoebe
it wasn't
talks
just
about-
pictures. It was like notes of like,
Right.
graduated, did this.
Yeah. So she kind of had an arc there. Paul Rudd didn't really have any arc. Like his
No.
whole thing was to be a love interest for,
Right.
and to be one
And
of
a
the
goofy
yeah,
guy.
be what's his
Kind of a-
face's replacement. What's the
Rick Moranis.
Rick Moranis?
Yeah,
But
He was
see,
kind of a
if
Rick
they were going to
Moranis
go for that
replacement, but-
same type of character, I'd rather see somebody like Charlie Day. You know that guy, Always
Yeah.
Sunny.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
he'd be a great like Rick Moranis type.
Oh, that would have been hilarious.
Spaz,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. I would have. That would.
But I don't think they were going for that same.
complaining because your television was really loud. So you know what I did? I turned mine up really loud so they would think it was me.
And like,
I love that
Well,
when
and
he's
that's why
having
the whole.
when he's having the party. He's like, Judy, this is Rick. Rick has a 401k with 5,000 in it. He like gives him his whole breakdown.
no,
of
I
his
like how
accounting.
this huge party is going on in his apartment, and Dana Barrett, like Sigourney Weaver's character, just literally tiptoes
Right.
across
The
the,
door.
apartment. He's
Yeah.
like,
Oh, hey,
Dana,
yeah. That was great. So he felt like he was trying to be a Rick Moranis, but he wasn't goofy. I think Charlie Day would have been better, which again was part of what was so ridiculous and hilarious when
Like, he wasn't
Sigourney
bad, but
Weaver
he
and
was-
Rick Moranis both end up being the dogs that
Mhm.
have to like join together.
And then they hook up.
Right, and they
Which
hook
again,
up.
like,
and so
again,
it's
the
so
original
opposite
movie-
of what you would expect.
The
which
original
would have
movie
been- yeah.
has this adult comedy level to it where you're like, holy crap. And this one had to hide all that. Like,
Right.
we had to like remember. Let's not talk about it.
But again, if we
it
go
was just
if-
again, but why?
I think if they go too on the nose with what the original characters was, then it just feels like we're doing literally the exact same film.
It's still in there. It's just not a
Yeah,
hard
that's the
film,
problem.
right? Like,
Yeah.
like
like,
she's
why would you do the exact same villain, the exact same
Yeah.
two dogs, the exact same awkwardness of getting together?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just that's
Yeah.
lazy.
Well,
they
I
still
agree.
had the funny lines though, like where the mom's
I
like,
love
"What
it.
happened to me?" And she says, "You were possessed by some kind of dog and got all humpy."
Yeah,
You know, like
Yeah.
that's still not a kid's joke.
No, that's
right?
not. Yeah,
It's
It's funny.
I thought
it's
that was
not
funny. yeah.
bad what they did, but like the fact that it's exactly the same, like
Mhm.
that's just
Yeah.
it's like, ugh.
It was a
It
little.
was
That was. It
cringe.
felt. It
When
felt
she
simple,
turned
over
into
simple.
a sequence dress, it was cringy. I was cringing.
I didn't cringe as much. I was just like, oh, okay, that's how she got the dress on, because they never really explained that in the original one. She just kind of like had the dress.
Oh,
right?
that's true. Yeah,
Yeah.
they did that quick change thing.
Yeah. So I didn't really have a cringe with it. It was more of like, yeah, it's just kind of a retread, but it didn't feel like it was, I don't know. It just felt like, well, we're just trying to focus on a lot of stuff with this, so we're not going to spend too much time on the plot as well. Like, we're going to spend
That's
more
what I mean.
time
If
on
you
trying
had
to
a
make
more
sure certain things happen
Yeah,
than
you
we
could
are
have had
going to
a
be.
more simple villain
Mhm.
where you didn't need all these. Well, we need to,
Just a different
check
one.
marks of
Yeah, a different one would have been fine. in my
nodding
mind,
to the
too.
original film, but just like literally copying, pasting.
This
that
one was
whole-
funny too because they were like, "Gozer, when's he coming?" Well, it's not a he or she. Oh, by the way, it's this really attractive, famous actress that we all know is a woman.
Well, then
You
they
know what I
all
mean?
kept calling her she the rest of the film. There was a couple moments with again, some of that might have been editing and directing, but like there was another part where they're driving the Ghostbusters car out of the city and the lights are like wow, 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 and then it cuts and the lights are off.
Yeah, I
And then
noticed
it
that
cuts
too.
back on the bridge and they're like wow, wow, and they're on again. And I was like, there's that. There's a couple moments where they like the camera jumped, like a person was talking and they would jump to them not being talking and stuff. And it was just like,
Can we talk about the Walmart already?
Yeah.
Like,
oh yeah. Go ahead.
complete garbage.
I do think though, because Paul Rudd in Ant-Man worked at Baskin Robbins, so that's why that Baskin Robbins scene is in there.
Yeah, I mean
Right?
that was obvious product placement in my mind.
But was that like
but
supposed to be a
why
tie-in?
is a
Because he also
Walmart
was reading.
even in a town of
Yeah.
500 people? Like it was
Oh, there'd
just
be a
so,
Walmart
Oh yeah,
out
there
there.
would definitely be a
There's
Walmart.
definitely a
out there.
Walmart out there. Yeah, and then
That's where Walmarts
Yeah,
are.
so
Yeah.
the relevance of Stay Puff marshmallows
Mhm.
coming alive.
that was dumb. I agree. That was a bit of a plot hole.
But I
There
did
was
like that
no,
the marshmallow fell and had the little indents on
Oh,
his
they were
belly.
cute as hell.
and, like,
But I'm
There
just
was
saying,
a
in
fun,
terms
effective
of
scene. It made no sense why they came alive.
No.
Like that made no sense.
the
at all.
Stay Puff Marshmallow Man came into existence
because of Ray.
they choose their destruction. And
Yeah.
he said,
I
I
thought the
tried
most
that
harmless thing
thing.
I could think of.
ever
Yeah.
is
Stay
the
Puft
Stay Puft
Marshmallow.
Marshmallow.
Yeah,
So-
I agree. That made no sense for those to be. I guess there was kind of a sense of like the way that ghosts are just appearing now. Like we've reached the point where
Inanimate
we
objects.
passed the point of no return. So ghosts are just going to start popping up and appearing in different places, as well as the dogs. And so yes, the marshmallows are going to appear too. That was kind of the sense of it. But I agree,
No,
it was a plot hole.
again. This is very nitpicking, but I'm
Yeah.
just saying.
I think it's a
That's so
fair
bizarre.
nitpick. Yeah.
But they were cute.
I thought they handled it well because it comes out and he's kind of cute. He's got the dents on him. He turns around and he's got a little butt and he pokes him.
Yeah.
And then you see right away the angry look he gets
He's
when
like,
he pokes
"Arr."
him.
Yeah.
But then it kind of goes back to being nice and then
Right.
it turns and bites him.
Right. He's like,
And then
"Ah."
they just start massacring each other.
Yeah. It was
Right?
pretty
Like it's
funny.
kind of.
But I did like the scene with the podcast when he realized he could shock them all.
Right.
When he
Yeah.
comes out of the thing in the end, he's like covered in.
Yeah. Which
Yeah.
is my favorite scene in the original Ghostbusters where Stay Puffed explodes and everybody emerges and they're all covered in goop.
Yeah.
Except Bill Murray just has like the smallest piece of marshmallow on his shoulder.
Yeah.
It's like one of the
That's
best
pretty funny.
funniest things I've
It's like
seen.
they're all just completely coated.
Except for him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's what happened to podcast at the end, right?
Mhm.
Because he's shocking all the little guys in the
Yeah.
car, and he comes out just completely covered in the goo.
Like he went full
Yeah.
berserker, but it was just like
Mhm.
marshmallows. It was funny.
Yeah.
But I would have to believe the Baskin Robbins thing is because of Ant-Man, because he's also reading Avengers comic book in the school. Paul Rudd's
Hmm.
character is.
Hmm.
I was just kind of looking for everything. I'm sure I missed a ton too on top of it. But in Walmart, they had the whole rack of the Adidas outfit, which Rick Moranis was wearing. So like, I want to believe those were tie-ins.
Yeah.
I don't know how much I'm reaching, but
Maybe. Yeah. I'm
And
sure
then,
there's a lot of
Did you
product
notice
placement
this?
stuff.
The Spinners Diner.
Mhm.
That's the logo for Blade Runner Spinners.
Oh, was it?
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
It's bizarre.
Hmm.
It's just bizarre.
But I really enjoyed the scene where they were trying to hunt the ghost for the first time
Mhm.
in the factory, and they're trying to catch it with the laser gun. I thought that whole scene was really fun and effective, and how, as a ghost, he led her in how to fix it. And I think there was
Yeah,
times
mention
where,
that.
I was a
ahead.
little bit like, I feel like even though you're unemotional, even being unemotional, you're not responding this as crazy as I would expect.
Yeah.
But
like when your brother's
yeah,
who
it was
can't
a bit
drive
restricted.
is driving a car and you're sticking out the side and there's parked cars.
Yeah,
all
and you're just
along the
like, oh
side.
wow, this is
And you don't have the
intense.
like the foresight to be like, turn left a little bit. You
Yeah.
know?
There's just things like that where little times it's like, oh, this, but that's her character. Like the first time she saw the chess piece move when she was playing chess, and she just kind of is like, oh wow. And a normal kid would be like, what? They would jump way back.
Or
But
Mom.
Yeah, or a
Yeah.
scientific approach to that is like, okay, now record it. Okay, get physical
like
evidence.
study it, figure
Let's-
out exactly what's
let's,
going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's prove my case. Nothing like, yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool.
Well, and they never explained how Trevor, Finn's character
that's
Trevor, how he was able to do work on cars. Like they never explained that
But
he
they
had any
showed at
experience
the
with that.
beginning when
They
they're
did,
going out to the farm
That he was fixing their car.
It's
so
real
they
quick, but
right.
yeah.
So, but again, that's just
but they never
undeveloped.
tell you why.
Right. It's like undeveloped stuff, and
Because even the girl, which they get wrong, but when they first show Phoebe, she has a hole in the wall, and she's like,
Yeah.
"I rerouted the power to give me 220 or whatever."
yeah,
right?
exactly.
Like,
Yeah, and you're like, where did you learn
again,
all that?
It's a rental.
It just is a little. It was all
You
just a
doing
little
what now?
underdeveloped, and I think for that reason, I didn't give it as good a rating as I was hoping. And
Right.
it was better, I should say, than I was expecting. I was expecting a C minus, like maybe a little bit better than the 2016 one, but what I got was a step better. Like it was a much better step towards being a good film, but it wasn't a great film.
Right.
I would just say it was a good film at
I think
times.
what you miss when you put kids in is child actors really haven't developed who they are as people.
Yeah.
Right. So when you have an original Ghostbusters, Bill Murray's in it. You're getting Bill Murray
Right.
pretending he can kill Ghost. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And same with Dan Aykroyd and all that kind of stuff. So the moments I really liked was like when she calls Dan Aykroyd. If you know much about his history, he's been really into aliens and UFOs. That's
Yeah.
kind of been his whole thing. And he
Right.
never apologizes for it.
Yeah.
So she says something like about the Ghostbusters, and he's like, "Oh, we haven't been active since the 80s, when the economy was good, the Reagan years."
Yeah.
Which, like, you cannot put in a movie these days, but they did.
Yeah.
And they let Dan Aykroyd be Dan Aykroyd.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely. And he works at an occult shop,
Yeah.
which is what he's into in real life.
Right.
So,
yeah, exactly. So,
Yeah.
like, I feel like kids don't have that developed personality. But back
Yeah.
in the day when Bill Murray was in a movie.
If you guys haven't, or even our listeners haven't, if you've never gone out there and looked at some of Dan Aykroyd's conversations talking about like the
cult
the
and-
cult and ghosts and aliens and science, it's trippy. It's
Right.
pretty crazy.
We really
It's
don't have a lot of that in actors now. What I was talking about, like Will Ferrell's one. Will Ferrell's gonna be Will Ferrell
Yeah.
in a movie.
Yeah.
Right.
absolutely. Yeah.
So
But I'm trying to think if there's any other
Gross
elements
point.
to
my
it.
Blank.
favorite joke came from Bill Murray, where he's like, "All right, everybody get ready to fire. We go," or he's like, "On the count of 3, we go on 2. 1, 2,"
Yeah.
and then they all fire. Like that's
Which
so Bill
again-
Murray and so funny.
Yeah. Which is again, it reminds me of like these are people that spend a lot of time together.
Yes.
Like that he would be able to make a joke like that, and somebody wouldn't go, "Wait, what?"
Yeah,
Like
they would all just
they
play
all
along.
they would play along, and they just know exactly what it is, and that he would be vamping while the other guy was getting ready to attack her, and like that sort of stuff. It's like it tells you that they've known each other and they've connected. And I thought like that was very
So you take that
sweetly
joke,
handled.
which I would assume Bill Murray came up with while there,
yes,
right?
Yeah.
Versus the girl's
Probably.
best joke was probably, "Why aren't you freaking out?" And she says, "Well, overstimulation calms me,"
Yeah,
which is funny.
Yeah.
But I'm sure somebody wrote that for her to say.
for sure. Yeah,
And so I think that's what this movie is missing too, is that personality.
yeah. I like.
They're all brilliant actors, all of them. I mean,
Yeah, she was a great actor. I
no,
would
meant
like
the
to.
original
Oh
cast.
yeah,
But I was just gross point blank for Dan Aykroyd.
Man.
Oh, yeah, he's
such a
Unbelievable
good one.
film.
The
It's one of my
Hitman.
favorites. Yeah,
Yeah, no, he was
He'll be coming
brilliant
around
in
that
that.
much. Yeah, that's a good movie. Yeah, I don't know if people have
Like-
probably seen that movie, but that's
like
a movie
all
that can
those
never be
guys are-
made nowadays. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? And I felt like it was nice as well with this one because this is normally not a film, even though it is a sequel. This was the kind of film that in a lot of ways harkened back to what films used to be like. You know, it wasn't trying to, other than appeasing, fans and stuff like that at times, it didn't feel overly like we're just trying to do the Hollywood version of this.
There's a lot of little things in there that were just unnecessary. The candy bar, Twinkie.
Well, so Egon ate a bunch of Twinkies, right?
Yeah.
That was his kind of thing.
Yeah, so
it
the
makes
Crunch
sense that
Bar.
I don't even think he ate them. I have to go back and watch it, but
Yeah.
he
I think he
literally
does
used
make-
it as an example to it would take a Twinkie the size of New York City to do something or other. I can't remember the exact scene, But he just
Okay.
references it. It's not like he was like eating
Obsessed
Twinkies
with
every
them.
day.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's Die Hard with that one dude he was buying the film of life. She's
Yeah,
crazy.
they could have
Or Zombieland.
what they could have done is they could have toned down the like, oh, look at this from the original Ghostbusters, and they could have turned up the let's develop the story a little more. Let's go into like some background for some of these characters and develop out. Like that would have this would have dialed that in from being a B- range for me to being like a B+ A- range. But it wasn't anything worse than I've seen in so many other movies, in so many other Hollywood things that I've given ratings around this area too. If anything, it's kind of lower than what I give some of those other Hollywood movies that have coming out that tend to do that.
The only thing I missed was when the ghost finally came out of the portal. They could have spent more time terrorizing the town, I think.
I was waiting for that. And I mean, we talked about Huey Lewis in the news and the whole, like, not being, getting sued until the,
and the music,
to
obviously.
the music. Right. But I was literally like, okay, here comes that scene, where the ghosts break out and they wreak havoc in the town and it's it's
just a montage.
Yeah, done.
Yeah, so
And
we're not even going
really do
to
that.
talk about Bobby Brown's sequel song.
Did he do it? I don't remember the sequel
Yeah,
song.
no, that's a really good song too.
Is that the
Yeah.
Bustin' Makes Me Feel Good?
No, that's
Ray Parker.
Oh, gotcha.
Jr. Yeah.
Sorry, I can't hear you very well. Should lean
Oh
me
my
back.
God, I forgot.
Yeah.
Anyway, so speaking of the theme, the Ray Parker Jr., right? This theme, there was 3 times in the movie I thought it was going to hit.
Yeah.
And my favorite time for it to hit is when they finally get the Ecto-1 going.
Yeah.
And they are leaving the basement and they come out, they rip out of the barn like full speed.
Yeah.
Like that would have been.
I was waiting for that. Yeah. The soundtrack
No,
wasn't great on this because of that. I think.
Just leave it
But
for
the music
end,
in the
at bridge.
original was so great. Like the boys are back in town,
Yeah.
They had those montages.
I mean, I
just
get you don't want to pay for the
great,
rights maybe anymore. And
They still used it though, so that's what
I
I'm
know,
confused
that's
on.
what I'm
It's
saying. Like, why use it at the very, very end?
Yeah. Like, was it cheaper to do it right at the end than do it during
This
the?
is how unimpressed I was with it. Is I knew that there was a post-credit scene, and I just didn't even care to see it.
Oh, it was great. It was. I
The
thought
first,
the post-credit scene was.
the
tell me what
first
it was.
post credit
Yeah.
was great. The first one is Bill Murray is being interviewed by a woman. You don't know who yet. And
Yeah.
you can see the card and he's like 2 wavy lines, 3 maybe.
I gets it. He goes three wavy lines,
And then it
yeah.
cuts to her and it's Dana.
Yeah.
It's Sigourney Weaver. And
Yeah.
then she shocks him.
And then she shocks him. Yeah. And he's like, and then he explains. So he's like, so you used to do this to like people? And he's like, yeah, but I only shocked the boys. And she's like, oh, that's just evil. And he's like, I know. And then she holds up another one and he gets it right. And then she like ends up shocking him again. And it's just cute because it's like, there's still a couple. So that's nice because it shows that like, they ended up together. And then it's just a funny harken back to.
And he makes her look young.
He does.
In that.
Yeah.
I mean, Bill Murray's kind of just aged naturally, which I'm fine with. I'm doing myself.
Yeah,
but like,
he hasn't lost it.
she looks
yet,
pretty
though.
good. I don't know how old she
Yeah,
is.
for her age.
Oh,
Yeah,
she's
but
awesome.
He hasn't, yeah.
Period. Yeah.
Yeah.
She's a good actress too.
And the other one.
The other one, it just cuts to Winston.
Yeah.
And he must be a doctor now because they call him doctor. Right?
Yeah.
And I can't tell what his business is, but he's
I
like,
don't
I've made a lot of money.
Yeah.
And then he goes to the original firehouse and opens it and the car pulls in.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah, they drive it into
That
like
was a
at the
good
beginning
joke.
of the.
It's like they turned it into a Starbucks.
Yeah, right. That's after the Reagan
I
joke.
thought they
right?
said, I could be wrong, but like I thought they said that he went into finance and made a ton of money.
Oh, maybe that's what it was.
Maybe or something like that. But they show the Ecto cruiser going into the city at the end of
The movie.
the movie, and then that's like the continuation of that scene is like you see it finally pull into the firehouse because they said some actor bought out all of Tribeca, right, which is where the firehouse was at. So he made enough money that they bought it. So again, I think
and then they show the basement and they show the old container and then the red lights flashing, which in the first one when he cuts remember the police chief or whatever cuts the power and it starts flashing. So
which again, I thought that actually worked well for me because it kind of there was the problem with like scenes that are like harkening back to like old stuff is when it doesn't fit in the plot and it doesn't progress anything. It's just like, oh yeah, they've got a Twinkie, oh yeah, they've got a Crunch Bar in this thing. It's like they're just showing it because it fits with what we know, right? That's bad. But that actually works because they talked about how that got bought out and how they all fell apart and they no longer were operating as the Ghostbusters after a certain point. They set up the idea that he had money though, and then they set up that now that they've been redeemed in a sense, their team is kind of reformed. They've put the past behind them, that he would buy the location, that he would kind of set it up. And so it's harkening back to things we remember, but it's also setting up a potential sequel and a furtherance of where things would naturally go with the story if they were going to do a sequel. So that worked for me.
Mm-hmm.
That's the type of, nostalgia that I can get behind in a film.
Yeah.
And there was a few too many occasions where it was nostalgia for just nostalgia's sake. And I think that's what you're saying you don't
it's not
like.
bad, but it's just like,
No, I agree.
the Twinkie wasn't even a thing, is what I'm
He's
saying.
getting stuck on the Twinkie. He's like, the Twinkie!
Yeah.
Just called the Twinkie
Woody
movie.
Harrelson from
Yeah,
Zombieland.
exactly.
I
Yeah.
liked Janine's cameos. That's like the secretary, I think she was.
Oh, yeah,
right, in the
and
original.
Annie Potts.
Yeah.
Is her real
I
name?
liked her at the end, though. She had a good joke at the very end where she's like, great office, lots of wall space.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, that's good.
Yeah, I think her cameos in it were pretty nice. I thought it would have been really touching if they somehow could have gotten Rick Moranis back in there.
Man.
Like, I don't know how, but that
Yeah,
would have been
or
But
really
he
thought-
is acting again, but he got like
weren't-
really beat up in New York City
Did he?
recently. Last year, I think. He
Oh,
got
I didn't know
mugged
that.
and like
I
someone
didn't know that.
beat the crap
Sorry,
out of him.
that's really sad, but
Yeah.
it kind of
Wait, is this
it
like
fits his
Ivan Reitman's
character.
dead? Are you
This
sure?
is legit. Like
Oh,
I hope he's not.
That was like the
badly,
one-
but it kind of fits his character.
that's like the one time in the last year the country came together where everybody's just like, you don't do that to Rick Moranis.
I honestly, I have no desire for him to see any pain or injury, but it's just like
Out of everybody?
out of everybody in the cast,
a
he was the
60-year-old
dorkiest.
Rick Moranis.
Yeah, but he's like the dorkiest
Yeah.
guy. So just
He was the funniest in that
Man,
movie.
he's
Yeah.
funny in all that stuff.
Everything.
Strange
He's
Brew,
great.
even
Yeah.
Honey, I Shrunk the
Yeah.
Kids.
Oh, I
and that
love
kind of
Honey, I
stuff.
Shrunk the Kids. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, I don't know if they'll ever make that's, and we talked about this I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning of the podcast. I said when I left, would I want to see a sequel to this new, reboot of the Ghostbusters? And I can't say that I would.
Not with these kids.
Not with these kids necessarily.
that are going to age out of it in 5 years.
Or
anyway.
maybe in 10 years when the Phoebe actress
Yeah, the
herself
problem-
can be an adult.
Yeah, the problem, it should have been a sequel of their kids, and it's been so long.
Yeah.
It is now their
It's now their
Now their
grandkids. So it's
grandkids,
40 years.
which is even harder to explain.
Yeah. So maybe new cast, new
Set it
plot.
in 95. and
They
just
maybe
have-
they're funded by, the
You know
restart.
what I would like to see?
What?
Winston and Janine sitting down, holding interviews, new people coming in,
Yeah.
new actors, and then a training montage with Dan Aykroyd and Bill Murray, but they're old, but they're training them how to be Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
And it's not the grandkids. It's
But,
not,
I mean,
right.
Yeah.
Again, what's so brilliant about the original is like they're selling their own product and they don't know how to sell it. That commercial is still funny
Yeah.
to sell.
Yeah.
Are you troubled by strange noises in the night?
Yeah.
Spooks, ghouls. I don't know. He goes
Well,
on.
like what I
We're
would
ready
say,
to believe you.
Yeah.
I mean, that.
Yeah.
they said
It's
that they
just
did their
golden.
job too well, which is why there's no ghosts anymore around. So in order for there to be a sequel, there's going to have to be a ghostly pandemic that
But they
breaks
showed
out
that
in New
machine
York.
beeping, which I guess would like Slimer would be in there.
Yeah, something
right?
would be in there, but those would have to get loose.
Or
Um,
what was the guy from the painting? Vigo?
Yeah, Vigo.
Like he would probably be in
Ivan
that
the
vault.
Great, Ivan the Terrible or something. I
Yeah.
don't know. Yeah. Yeah, he would probably be in the vault. Like there would have to be something that lets all those ghosts out
Mm-hmm.
for that ghost activity, or just a new evil slime is building up in the sewers and it's causing more ghosts and ghouls.
I
to pop
did
out.
want to give credit to this film, Afterlife, because they show the blue guy that eats all the metal.
Mhm.
And it's not like it cuts to him and he looks scared and he goes, Muncher, scared.
Mhm.
Like the only time they give him a name is when the girl says Muncher.
Yeah.
Right.
And it shows you as well that they can limit their amount of nostalgia, because that scene could have so easily, sorry, I got ice in my mouth. It could have so easily been Slimer.
Mhm.
Like they could have just made that Slimer because they wanted to have nostalgia. But it's like, no,
Or
they're
sell
creating a
toys.
new,
Yeah.
they're creating a new
when
ghost.
Paul Rudd lets it out, that's the dog.
Yep.
But was Slimer just there?
Slimer wasn't. Muncher
No, I
was
mean
just there.
Muncher.
What the way that I came across to me, and again, this is why I was more okay with the Stay Puft ones, even though that was forced and felt like a little bit of plot hole, is there where they had been holding back the ghost launching of the big bad girl, but as soon as that other keymaster got loose, it basically became a point where the guns could no longer keep the amount of ghost energy and ghost power because it was 2021 at bay and at check. And so the final nail in the coffin was when Paul Rudd lifted
Yeah.
the
No,
gun
I thought
and
it
allowed
was-
it all to.
It was doing its job. That's what caused the earthquakes.
No.
Yeah,
Those-
because they were like, it's
Oh,
more
yeah,
of an
yeah,
explosion. So it was every time those guns would
every
go
time the
off.
guns would go off, there would be a buildup of that ghost power or whatever you want to call it, spiritual energy that would create earthquakes in the area because it would be a buildup of that. And then the ghost would go off and they would block it and push it back down. And I think what just happened is it just kept building and building and building. And then once that ghost dog got loose, then it really was like all bets are off because they can't really do much to stop it at this point.
That's another thing I was thinking plot line, you know, I was like, you mean all these earthquakes going off and nobody gives a crap, you know, but I was like,
yeah, they just kind of were like,
then again,
okay.
this kind of stuff is actually happening here in Phoenix, Arizona.
Yeah. And
Where
nobody
like
cares.
vibrations and weird noises
Yeah.
literally going on. And
Yeah.
it's like a local news thing. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
And they kind of make fun of it because when it first happens, the kids and the mom all get under the table, and the boy's like, "Remember that time we all died under a table
Yeah.
during an earthquake?"
Yeah.
And then it happens when she's in school, and none of the kids react.
Yeah, that was pretty good. Yeah. So,
I mean,
there
it
you
just
go.
shows you that they're used to it, right?
Yeah. Well, there you go. I don't think we have to talk for an hour and 40 minutes here almost. Any other stuff you guys wanted to talk about with Ghostbusters that we didn't
Just
get
go
to?
watch the original. Just sit down.
Or if your kid,
Yeah.
if you go see this one and your kid likes it, show them the originals.
Show them the originals. I don't think there's any reason in my mind to watch 2016.
No,
There's-
I just pretend
there's
like
no-
that never happened.
Yeah, pretty much. But I do think, if you like the first and the second, this is a good one to check out. And it's not despite what you're saying, I don't think it's a bad movie. I just think it's a little bit underdeveloped is really it. It's heavy on
That's
nostalgia. It's a little bit underdeveloped, but the acting is good for the most part. The pacing is decent for the most part. And
The fan service,
the
I
fan
thought
service
was
is
good.
fun at
Yeah,
times.
I just thought that
And
they just weren't a part of the film.
It's
And
got a moment at the end where if you're familiar with the original cast, it is touching potentially. But it can be, I think, good just even if you're not familiar with the original one. It's got a touching family
Mhm.
type. The idea
It's
that
like
family's important and the theme of that being the buildup and the payoff is nice.
Yeah, but they spent so much time just bashing family units and then not giving good examples of anybody.
Yeah, but good stuff too. I mean, Finn's character in the film, Trevor, is very close to Phoebe, and he helps her out a lot, and they go on this adventure together. And Callie, her mom, does protect them, and so it's not like there's a
But
good
it's just-
example of family, but
Well,
it
like,
does show you how family
Like
can be so important.
The alcoholism, except for the jokes. How is that helping or hurting?
I didn't look at the alcoholism as that a big thing. It was almost more for comedic.
It was mentioned a lot. Like
I know, but it wasn't
just-
like
it was so odd to
it
me.
wasn't like they specifically pointed out where the family is having all of these issues and
there was a
the mom
moment
is
where
uncontrollable
Phoebe
and she's
came
abusive.
down
And,
the stairs with that instrument, and she's literally passed out.
yeah, it was the middle of the night. I mean, it's late at night. She's at home. She had a glass of wine. I
She'd
mean,
been on a bender.
she went on a date and she went to a bar
No, it was
with her.
before the date.
No, I know. I'm talking about the times that she's drinking, right? She wasn't like in the middle of the day driving down the road with a bottle in the front seat. And
She could have just
you know,
as easily been
she wasn't
on
drunk.
the couch with the book with a glass of wine.
Right, but anytime
didn't need to be
we saw
unconscious.
her drinking, it never felt like it was at a bad moment. It always felt warranted by the story. An alcoholic is somebody that their whole life revolves around drinking, and that is
Talking about drinking.
yeah.
like
But she was
did.
joking with that. Yeah, she made a joke about it. She's like, "There better be a bar." Like,
I remember.
but
I remember
that's a
that
joke.
one, and then
care.
he says something like, "Did you ever try this?" And she goes, "No, I tried whiskey," and that was it. Like,
Yeah.
that's
There,
all
there
I
was a
remember.
lot of joking around about it. And I'm not saying that's maybe in bad taste, but I never got the sense that the
no, no,
relationship
no.
she had
That's
with her
what I'm saying.
family was
Like, it
impacted
just-
by
It
drinking.
didn't have a point, is what I'm saying. So why
It was a joke.
focus on it?
That
Like,
was the thing. It was as a joke. That was part of her
Mm.
character that she drank and she liked drinking, but it wasn't. They weren't trying to make her an alcoholic, so they were just trying to joke about it a lot.
Another thing
in
I
my
did
mind.
like was Paul Rudd seemed to actually have thought about his character a little more.
Yeah.
Even to the fact where like they pick up the kids from the prison, and then
Yeah.
when they're getting out of the car, and he's like, "So kids, that's why and he just gives up, right? But like,
Yeah.
like I don't know, that's funny. I don't think that was written. I think he
Well, I
probably
thought
just tossed
I
it.
like how he was introduced to Carrie Coon's character.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I liked him I liked him as a character. I did not like him as a replacement for Rick Moranis.
Yeah, for
it was
sure.
just it
But
wasn't.
I just like
Yeah,
Paul
the
Rudd.
same dichotomy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Then when he became the dog, it was literally like to me a Saturday Night Live skit of him doing an impression of Paul
Exactly.
Rick
Yeah.
Moranis,
And that's why Charlie Day probably would have been much better
Yeah,
for that.
right.
You know, he wouldn't have felt like such a like a skit. It would have felt like, yeah, you're just a weirdo. Kind of goofy.
In my book, I don't think Paul Rudd can do wrong, though. I've loved him since Wet Hot American Summer. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah, but like,
Yeah.
why did his arm sleeves? Why did his jeans have to be cut?
he had
Like,
the flower in the ear, too.
Yeah, that was funny. He's
That
like,
was funny.
Here, I got this for you. She just like
And
eats
she
it.
eats
Yeah.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell
thought
what
that
she
was
said in response to that.
Oh,
When they were using the demon voice,
yeah.
he says something, and
I
then
thought she said something like, "Oh, that's sweet of you" or something,
Yeah.
and then like eats the flower.
Yeah,
and
and
so,
yeah.
I thought there was, yeah. I mean, if we go really into depth with things, there's so many things we could say. Well, like, the whole they drive up to the top of a mountain
That's what I mean.
where
Like,
there's
when I-
earthquakes, and they hang out on the top of this rickety, elevator
hole.
right over the whole thing, and then they look down and they see like a hot mess going on down there, right? Like when the camera jumped, and there's this hot mess of like spiritual demons and crud down there, and then they're just like, meh, and they move on, and then later they come back and like, yeah, we should go down there,
Mhm.
like,
I didn't understand the whole.
yeah,
He's like, I was here yesterday.
yeah.
Crazy.
I didn't understand the whole thing with the girl, honestly. Like, she didn't need. That's one of the characters I was saying earlier didn't need to be in there.
Oh.
Lucky or whatever her name is.
Yeah, it almost felt like they were setting up their own little foursome of Ghostbuster
Yeah,
players,
because you needed
and she was
like,
one of them.
somebody to
To fit the Oscar-winning
Yeah,
check
'cause
boxes.
Yeah.
because we have 4 jumpsuits.
No, I agree. It actually would have been, in my mind, more interesting if she hadn't been there, and then Trevor's character, the older brother, would have been just basically ticked off the whole time,
Mhm.
and like he hated his life, and he got a job because
But
he had
this brought
nothing to
them all
do.
together.
But this brought them all together, and it would have made him. It would have made his role in it with Phoebe, like, she tries to confide in him and say, like, there's this thing going on. He's like, I don't care. This is stupid. But then he gets involved versus he kind of is like, he's like trying to get in a relationship, and he's trying to work, and he's trying to be a brother, and he's trying to fix a car. And it was a little too much for
Throughout
him.
the movie, I thought it was going to end with the mom, Phoebe, Trevor, I think you said the boy's name was. And then they were going to like shoot all 3 shooting the guns,
Yeah.
but it wouldn't be enough. They needed that 4th. And then I thought Dan Aykroyd was going to come out and be like, I've got the 4th one.
Maybe, yeah.
Because then it kept it as like family and Dan Aykroyd.
Yeah.
But
I was fine with all 3 of them showing up. I thought that was pretty fun.
yeah, me too.
Yeah.
It was unexpected to me.
Anyway,
I just wanted more of them, not just a
Yeah.
1-minute cameo, I guess. It's just like, again, like, I just think soundstage, maybe half a day's worth of work.
Yeah.
How much did you make?
Yeah.
And no interaction with the other actors and actresses.
very
Yeah,
little.
Like,
They
I
had
don't think
some.
so. Did Bill Murray talk to anyone other than?
Yeah, I talked to Phoebe, talked to one of them, Dan Aykroyd, talked to podcast.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. I think they talked to Carrie real quickly, and I thought it was very
'cause
touching
she
that they
says
all
the
had a
name.
moment where they got to hug their, coworker,
but I mean, even Bill Murray,
grandfather, father. I thought that was nice.
what did he say in that? Like you're saying, that talk show? He's like, well, a lot of people told me they cried at the end, so I think it's going to be a very successful comedy.
Yeah.
That's great.
That's funny. Yeah,
That's great.
it was weird that he didn't talk. I will say that.
No, I actually was afraid he was gonna talk,
I
was like, "Come on," because I liked the beginning where they didn't show his face, and so
Yeah.
when they did show him, I was like, "Oh, that kind of sucks," but I get it. At least the other guys are there,
Yeah.
and they're like happy about it.
it just didn't make sense. I get that it would have been awkward, but it's like he had vocal cords. All the
Yeah.
other ghosts could talk.
Yeah.
He just didn't talk.
To me, it's like a
like you don't think that he would at least say like "I love you"
Oh,
to his
yeah.
daughter as he
That's
disappears.
Talk
Like,
about gratuitous nostalgia. Why were the books stacked
oh yeah,
up in a row, which was the library scene in the beginning?
Yeah.
I mean, like,
there was a lot of it.
Was
yeah.
that ghost there? No.
There was a lot of nostalgia type things. It's
Mhm.
yeah. Anyway,
I just think the using non-living actors in movies is a very thin line between like
it actually looked really good, but
Respect
it
him.
just looked like a bad ghost. But it really looked like him.
yeah.
yeah.
And
doing
it
a
actually
good
job
it
with
looked
it,
like him as his Ghostbuster character might have aged, not how he actually aged.
Correct. Yeah, it
because he
looked
got
like an
he
older
got
version
pretty
of him, yeah.
chunky.
Yeah.
in
He
his
looked
life.
yeah, but they didn't show. He wasn't chunky in the ghost version.
No, that's
He
what I'm
just looked
saying. It
older.
looked like you took Egon from
Oh,
Ghostbusters
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
aged him up,
Gotcha.
not
Yeah.
Harold Ramis, who actually got
Gotcha. Yeah.
kind of chunky.
Awesome. Well, give some ways again. I'll have it in the description, but some ways to get connected to you
Yeah,
guys.
thevasic.com. It'll be in the description below.
Sounds
Yep.
good.
And I'm Ross Caliguri, and you can check me out at dreamingintheshadows.com.
Awesome. As always, check out our website, which is reelreviewmedia.com, or go to Facebook, which is facebook.com/the The Real Review. You'll be able to get connected to any of the episodes that we post up on there. We'd love to have you get connected. Also, if you're listening to this podcast, I feel like I should mention, if you're this far in, then hopefully you've enjoyed the podcast. So go ahead, leave us a review if you can on whatever platform you're listening, and share. Let other people know we've got the podcast going on. We're doing these like once a month or so, kind of whenever a movie comes out. I know a ton of other movies have happened, but we're just kind of doing it as we can. But yeah, we'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions on the podcast, that being the case. So shoot us an email if you had any thoughts about Ghostbusters Afterlife, if you thought any of our opinions were dumb, bad, good, whatever. reelreviewmedia@gmail.com is the place to do so. We would love to hear from you. So that being said, it's been real.